Volume 1, Prologue. I will leave. I kinda came to another world alone for a little to see if anyone wants to pick it up. This is another teaser. Author note, this is a fantasy. This story will generally advance by the main character's first-person perspective. Fantasy, harem, and double standards are to be included. Readers with an aversion to such material are advised to turn back. ED note, double standard, it's where you have a certain standard, but apply it unfairly or unevenly across groups. For example, it's fair to give cookies to everyone, but you let the girls have more. It's fair for everyone to pay taxes, but you're okay with having your friends not pay. Prologue. The one I faced in the mansion's courtyard was my sister. A perfect existence. If someone out there were to be completely loved by God, it would probably be someone like her. Why did it come to this? I hold my breath, and gripped the saber I held in one arm with both of my hands. The tip of it was shaking. It wasn't just fatigue. The emotion of fear was also apparent in the blade. Ha, ha. The saber in my hands was real. My sister's rapier was real as well. For us to be seriously going at each other with weapons, I never would have thought it sane. However, the one to propose this duel was, undoubtedly, her. Wearing a dress, she spoke as she looked at me without any interest. Are you still going to continue this, Oniai-sama? While she called me Oniai-sama now, she usually doesn't even call my name. You, that thing, and other such phrases were how she usually referred to me. But no one in the surroundings ever found fault in that. She wore an ivory-colored dress and red shoes. Even though we were both exchanging slashes, unlike me, she wasn't sweating at all. As if she was going to head off somewhere formal, her outfit was well in order. The rapier that sister held in her hands was an article made by a skilled craftsman. It was adorned with ornaments, and the hilt was inlaid with a yellow orb. The gem that couldn't be made anymore in the current era was a special tool that brings forth special skills. The rapier it had been inserted into was a magic item, a weapon called a magic sword. It was a rare good that couldn't be bought even with 100 gold coins. With the sword in hand as a mismatch with her appearance, my sister's standing figure was in a mess. This year, she was to turn 13. Flowing, golden hair waved on her head. Her figure was, unbefitting of her age, quite voluptuous. Her blue eyes stared at me coldly. Chills raced down my spine. Scary. I wanted to run. But I could not. Not yet. We're not done yet. I forcefully contained my fear and stepped forward. I had faith in my well-trained sword skills. I was confident that I wouldn't even lose to adults. The Walt family, in order to succeed our noble household, I received severe training from a young age. I was confident in my blade. But... Ha, you sure are slow. In the past, I was also a prodigy. A wonder child. They always showered me with praise. In order to answer to my parents' and my family's expectations, I desperately put in all my effort. But that effort, before the sister 2 years younger than me, was useless. Obviously, my sister was a girl. As swordsmanship was thought of as unnecessary for her, she didn't pick it up over the passage of years. She was just taught the basics, and all she should know was how to hold it and swing it. Even so, I couldn't win against her. Wah! We clashed for an unknown amount of times, and my body was covered in numerous shallow cuts. Even when I slashed at her, she easily dodged with minimal movements. At the same time, her whip-like rapier blade came down on my face, arms, and stomach. Just then, I could have given you 3 fatal wounds, Lyle. The name of the girl who said my name with a smile on her face was Lyle Walt. If there ever was one loved by the heavens, anyone would think it was the sister before me. The only one to truly hate her was me. Having my attack dodged, my legs buckled, and I fell over on the lawn. My body was covered in blood. My clothes were sticking to me from my sweat. My blue hair was also sticking to me, but I didn't pay it any mind. When I tried to stand, I saw those red shoes coming at me. Guh. I blocked with my arms, but I couldn't kill the momentum. My body floated a little before I rolled across the ground once more. How unsightly. Yes, truly, to think that this was our son, it's much too pitiful. Where I collapsed were my mother and father. We were surrounded by a majority of the retainers, but not a single one directed any encouragement at me. Father, mother, why? I wanted to cry. I bore the pain to stand up, and turned to find Seal's smile awaiting me. What could be the problem? Is that all you were, Lyle? She purposely called out my name to provoke me. Good grief. Even when Seals only learned the bare minimum of swordsmanship. It really should be Seals succeeding the Walt house. My parents' words were directed at my back. Even when their once will say things like this, they were once kind to me. The saber I held in my hands was an item they had prepared for me long ago. Lyle, you're also a man of House Welt. Only the best of weapons are fitting for your hand. It suits you, Lyle. As expected of our son. They had continued directing a kind smile at me until around the time I turned 10. After that, my parents came to dote on my sister seals. It was around then that they had lost interest in someone like me. That wasn't something limited to this family. The retainers, who had always treated me in a way fitting the future head of the household, started treating seals as their lord. They spoke ill of me behind my back and kept saying I wasn't fit to succeed. Until I was 10, the household and the populace had been expectantly waiting for me to take over. But now was different. This was the reality. With this, Seals is the successor. Good grief, even if they didn't do something like this, all we had to do was drive the boy out. Even when there's no way he'd ever win against Seal-sama. What a fool. It was so mortifying that tears began to come out. Just what did I ever do? Why must I be so hated? Even Seals was my sister. It's not like I had hated her. I had treated her as a brother should. Did Seals find something to hate in that? Era, you're going to cry? You truly are unsightly. She began laughing to herself. She looked like she's truly having fun. Why are you doing this? What did I ever do to you? When I raised my voice, Seals's expression changed from smiling to expressionless. How loud? It doesn't matter to you. It doesn't really matter to me whether you're there or not. But since you became an eyesore, I'll have you out of here. What are you saying? She raised her left hand at me and pointed her finger. She intends to use magic. Looking behind, I saw that my parents and the rest of the household had noticed her actions and moved out of the way. They had given silent approval of her attack. Damn it! Ice wall. A wall of ice manifested in front of me. It's a water attribute magic, and its property is shield. In order to be praised, in order to make my parents turn my way, I had lost myself in training myself. It wasn't just in the sword, magic, and horse riding, and even knowledge, but in front of the existence in front of me, it was all worthless. Fire bullet. Showing her superiority, Seals started chanting magic after I had finished my preparations. In contrast to me, it was a fire attribute spell, and its level was among the basics of the basics. It was also quite a user-friendly one that merely produced a ball of fire. The wall of ice I had created was chipped away by the fire all too easily. It wasn't just a single shot. From Seals's fingertip, she shot several hundred repetitions of the same spell. Each and every one's output was quite high, and while my magic was supposed to triumph over it attribute-wise, I couldn't even win against Seals's elementary-level spells. Ku, Earth Hand. From the ground around me, grew 4 arms made of earth. Each of them obeyed my will to attack her. How boring. Seal smiled as she used the rapier in her hand to cut them all down. A rapier is, essentially, a weapon specialized in stabbing. With it, she used magic to easily cut them. Earth Bullet. In order to win with versatility, I activated my next magic. Rocks shot up from the ground like cannonballs and tore up the lawn. But I have no time to think about anything like that. Shield. Without a change in expression, she casted it with a smile. A simple wall made of pure mana completely blocked my earth bullet. It wasn't on Seals's level, but I had shot several dozen shots. Still, not a single one got through. I don't have any mana left. I'll have to end it here. Even I could understand I had no prospects of victory. But I had to fight her no matter what. Otherwise, I would be driven out of the house without having done anything. What started this all was, as I thought, Seals's words. Hey, father. This year, Oniai-sama will turn 15 and become an adult. Is this not the time to hold a match to determine the future head of the Walt house? Normally, males would be the ones to succeed. But my parents said she was correct. They acknowledged our match. The loser will leave the house. That's all right with you, right, Oniai-sama? She hated me, or perhaps she simply found me unpleasant. Like that, my fight with Seals had started. Originally, it wasn't something that would ever have happened. Having a girl succeed a household wasn't something that never happened. But in those cases, there were certain circumstances, such as the basic principles of the family. House Walt has had a male successor for generations. From the founding first-generation head, a direct line of males have handed down the family to one another. It's a household with over 200 years of history. Even so, father and mother obeyed Seals's words and had the match with me. The eldest son approved. Seals, never, to someone like you. As I stepped in, I slashed at Seals with all my might. At my sister, who had the appearance of a frail girl, I cut down at full force. From a third-party perspective, I would definitely be the one at fault here. But somewhere in my heart, I understood it. My hundreds, my thousands, my hundreds of thousands of practice swings went into this blow. The attack with all power behind it would cleave her in two if it landed. If it landed, that is. It's good that I was able to close in. The attack was the strongest I could muster at the moment. But my stroke never reached her. Turning half of her body to dodge the vertical slash, she swung up the rapier to deliver an attack at me. As if to torment me, she continued to carve light cuts into my body. At this rate, it's never going to end. Not yet. As my dodged sword dug into the ground, I released my left hand from it and swung up with my right. With the first sword stroke, it traced AV into the air. Seeing that, Seals's eyes opened wide. It was my last resort. It's a skill I had practiced in secret, but still, it didn't reach her. The blade cut close to her dress. She could even react to that? It was my special trump card, but Seals's reflexes had exceeded that. However, if you count the cut along her dress, it actually worked. It reached. My sword reached Seals. Looking from the sidelines, the sight of a brother getting pissed off against his younger sister must be repulsing. But as my opponent was Seals, there's no meaning to that. Just see her pretty face be twisted in pain for a brief moment, made it all worth it. We both took a step back, and while out of breath, I raised the corners of my lips. This was the most resistance I could offer. Right now, this was all I could do. What's wrong, Seals? She looked down on me with an expressionless face, shaking. She must be feeling humiliated. How many times have I ever seen my sister Seals truly embarrassed before? Don't call my name, filth. Eh? By the time I noticed it, she had disappeared from my view. Her voice came from behind me. As I turned around, her fist entered my sight. What? There wasn't any pain. By the time I noticed it, the saber had left my hands, and I was sent sprawling in the air. Within my vision that seemed to see everything moving in slow motion, it seemed that Seals was the only one moving normally. She approached and kicked me with those red shoes this time. I looked up at her as I flew through the air and saw her preparing to fire off magic. This is bad, I'll die. I tried to muster up magic defenses immediately, but the magic Seals fired was a high-class one. It was a magic that required a considerable amount of skill as a magician. She's really coming at me to kill me. Firestorm. As I heard her disinterested voice, I also chanted. Water ball. I wrung out my remaining power, and deployed my own magic around myself. A tempest of flames engulfed me and tried to burn me to death. I had also activated magic, but I don't know if this will block it. All I understood was that the magic she just used was fired in an honest attempt to kill me. Am I really that much of a hindrance to you, Seals? As I called out, I flopped onto the ground. The impact rocked my body and pain raced all around it. Coupled onto the pain I hadn't been feeling up until now, the impact caused me to writhe on the ground. And my own saber fell beside me. The tip pierced the earth, and its metal had turned a dull red from the heat. If I grasped it I would definitely be burned, but still, I reached out my hand. I'm not thinking of anything anymore, but I simply didn't want to part with it. To me, the blade in front of my eyes was my final bond with my parents. The surroundings watched me. Without even thinking about saving me, they looked upon me. Looking at me miserably crawling towards it, there were even those that laughed. The only one to walk to me was the one with a vulgar smile on her face, Seals. Serves you right. Although I'm a bit surprised you still managed to cling to life. Saying that, she broke the sword in front of my eyes. Perhaps because of the heat, or her own skill, the saber was cut through as if it were made of not metal, but paper. My extended hand fell to the ground in vain. It grabbed onto the grass. I looked up with tears in my eyes. Using her left hand to fiddle with her hair, Seals had a full smile on her face. Oh, that was your favorite one, right? How unfortunate. She looked like she was having fun as she happily looked down on me. However, hearing my parents' words, she turned around. Seals, that's enough, isn't it? Your clothes were ruined. How about we spend the day buying you a new dress? Oh, that sounds nice, dear. There wasn't a single soul to look at the beaten and burnt up me. They were already treating me as if I wasn't there. Please wait. Father, mother. I strained my voice and reached out my hand. But they merely turned their eyes to me once. Their gaze were still one where they were looking at something filthy. And like that, I let my head fall to the ground. I let out my voice and cried out without regards to the surroundings. I wonder just how much time had passed, but it shouldn't have taken that long for me to have lost consciousness. I remember myself bawling on top of the lawn, but by the time I noticed it, I was on a bed. Bandages were wrapped around my body, and it appeared that I had received some treatment. Just who? Father? No, that wouldn't happen. I'm not sure if I should be saying this, but Father would never save me. There's the attitude he had when he left me, but more importantly, this place wasn't inside the manor. I looked up at the wood grains on the ceiling, and understood this wasn't the inside of my own home. I wonder who saved me. It hurt to move, so I turned just my head to look over the surroundings. I was in a wooden house, no, more like a hut. My eyes turned back to the ceiling. I had woken up, but my body still felt like it needed some sleep. Also, I don't want to think of anything right now. So I was abandoned. Having been abandoned by my family, Seals's face floated into my mind. Her vulgar smile as she ridiculed me. At that time. Who is it? Around me, the sound of someone speaking, no more like the feeling that someone was making a speech. I was assaulted by a strange sensation. There's no one, right? I feel no presences around me. Thinking that I was mistaken, I closed my eyes. I don't know by whom, but I had been treated. I'll sleep for a bit, and recover my stamina. My body felt heavy, and I wanted to close my eyes. Right now, I don't want to think about anything. It probably happened a little after I had closed my eyes. I heard a voice. Oi, oi, that means it came, right? It definitely came. Rather than cheerful, the voice sounded violent. It was loud, and it laughed heartily. Who? Could it be the person that saved me? It didn't look like my voice reached him. What's more, for some reason, I feel quite tired. It's as if my mana was being sucked out. Father, please shut up for a bit. This time, it was a worn-out voice of a young man. There are multiple people? Even so, what's with this uneasy feeling? I can't let out my voice. My thoughts aren't getting through to them. Try understanding what Grandpa's trying to say, Dad. I mean, it's our first conversation. And I can feel that a direct descendant is nearby. He definitely carries our blood. This time, it really was a cheery voice. 3? No, there may be more. More than a voice, perhaps a presence. I couldn't think that there were only 3. I get what Grandpa's saying. First, let's calm down and confirm it. I heard a new one. Since he said Grandpa, was it a family? But all of their voices sounded young, or at the very least, they don't seem aged. Well, it's our first conversation, you see. But, there are things we want notice at this rate, I think, you see? Again. With this, is that the 5th voice? Another one rang out. You re too pessimistic, Pops. More importantly, I want to know what became of him. It would be nice if he noticed, but, what's up, Broad? The name Broad came out, shocking me. I mean, Broad was the name of my own grandfather. This might mean that I'm dead. Are you all right with that? My inner thoughts screamed, as I strained to hear the voices. It's my grandson. It's Lyle. There's no doubt it's my grandson. It was so reminiscent of my grandfather's voice, it made me want to give a bitter smile. He was one who was a tad bit too soft on his grandson, but even those emotions could be felt through his voice. Still, he sounded a little younger. It didn't have the hoarse tones of an older man. Just what was the meaning of this? I thought, as silence spread for a while. For real. What a noisy bunch. All their voices seemed shocked. Just what sort of situation am I in? On that day, my fate began to turn. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Volume 1 Chapter 1, Former Noble Lyle. TL, this one has a really slow start, but it does get rolling, it seems. Former Noble Lyle. The me in the mirror had my blue hair hanging down. The me in the mirror had a severely worn-out face. There were some places on the bandages that were soaked in blood, but the wounds had already closed. Perhaps the burnt parts had been treated with special medicine, but they had faded. How does it look, young master? As I turn around to the voice that called out to me, I offer my thanks to the old man. Thank you, it's much better now. The old man was the one who lived in a hut on the side of the courtyard, the gardener. It seems he has family, but after his wife died, he started living alone inside of the hut. On the wide grounds of the estate, the hut that was tucked away in quite a hidden place was apparently a repurposed baggage shed. That's good. You were in quite a dangerous spot there. If I was the estate's doctor, I would be able to treat you a little more gently, but... This apologetic old man was, despite his demeanor, a former soldier. Perhaps he had some knowledge on treating injuries, but he had healed me up quite skillfully. Anyways, more than the man's knowledge on treatment, my most pressing matter was... I've been completely abandoned by my parents. Haha, I can't do anything but laugh about it. Looking at me raise a soulless laugh, the man, Zell, lowered himself into the chair in the room. Being over 70, he lived by maintaining a portion of the vast yard. There are several gardeners in service to the house, but the only one who lived isolated in a hut was Zell. I had heard my parents talking amongst themselves about having trouble trying to get the man who served from my grandfather's generation to vacate the place. He had carried my wounded body here, and had nursed me over the 3 days I had spent sleeping. I sit on the bed, and give my thanks once more. Thank you for saving me, Zell. Although I don't have anything to give you in return. Seeing me return a joke, Zell let out a deep sigh. I'm relieved you look fine. But the state of this manor really has been strange lately. The reason Zell let out a sigh was due to how the state of affairs of the mansion had completely changed over the past 5 years. I occasionally thought it strange as well, but even so, there are some things you can't understand if you're always in the midst of them. There's this time's case with the young master, but making the young miss the air. If we asked the previous generation, I wonder just what he would say in his rage. My grandfather, Lyle Walt, was a strict noble. He held the court rank of count, and governed land as a provincial noble. That means he also held an army. The Walt house is one that serves as an advisor to royalty. In grandfather's time, he was often called to the imperial capital to speak with His Majesty, the King. Father often bragged to me about it. But he was also an exceedingly rigid person. He was strong in battle, and one who poured his effort into his territory's internal affairs. The next generation's king also considered him a leading noble of Bonsium. He was just a little too soft on his grandchildren. His first grandson, me, was quite spoiled by the man. I only have a kind impression of him, though. It's just that I don't know how I'd face him now that I'm not succeeding the house. I had betrayed the expectations he placed on me. Thinking that, I felt all my diligence up until now to have been in vain. Now, I've already lost everything. Young master, don't corner yourself too much. You're still young. Please live the rest of your life facing forwards. Thanks, but I have no goal. Up until now, I've only ever aimed to become a good lord. Now that that's gone, I've no idea where to go. I'm deplorable, right? As I smiled in self-derision, Zell stood up, and proceeded to the kitchen to prepare something to drink. I covered my face, and began thinking of what to do from here on. I can't stay here anymore. I'll have to find somewhere to go. From the time I started being taken care of in Zell's house, I was able to take off the bandages by the 5th day. I wonder if he had used some expensive medicine, but my recovery was fast. But being taken care of by him for so long leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Also, I was driven out of this estate. I may bring trouble to the man who's sheltering me. And during our evening meal, I brought it up as Zell was conversing with me. What he was describing was a scene where my grandfather raced across the battlefield, and about his actions in the imperial capital. I remembered the stories he told on our 3rd day's dinner as I spoke. Zell, I'm thinking of becoming an adventurer. An adventurer, you say? It's true that some noble who don't succeed households go off to become adventurers, but you have both magic and knowledge. With that skill set, government work is always possible. I shake my head from side to side. I may bring trouble to whatever service I'm employed in. The Walt house is a large one, and it has influence befitting of that. If it's just at the level of threatening my employers, then that Seals would probably do it easily. I've lost everything. I just thought I would get something from scratch with my own hands. I see. If that's the young master's desired path, then so be it, but... According to your stories, famous adventurers aren't troubled by money, right? I'll definitely repay this debt someday. At that time, I'll come back a splendid adventurer. Ha ha ha, I'll be waiting for it, young master. Zell laughed in a loud voice. I wonder if he's just going along with my joke. Naturally, in the depths of my mind, I truly didn't think that the occupation of an adventurer was something that easy. Even if I look like this, I was raised to inherit a ruling position. As a feudal lord, I knew painfully well just what the existences called adventurers were. They challenged the unknown, and returned from labyrinths with great treasures. If you asked, kids would probably call them their aspirations, but in reality, they were just a gathering of ruffians. If you wanted to call them mercenaries, it would be more than fitting. Those mercenaries could calmly assault villages to plunder their food stock. Besides the part where they deal with monsters, adventurers were nothing but a troublesome existence. However, it's not like all of them were villains. Famous adventurers could work with the government on favorable terms. For those that run mercenary brigades on the side, they could be hired for large sums of money based on their skill. But an adventurer, is it? It sounds like the free city of Bime would be a good place to set up shop. I gave an honest inquiry at Zell's words. Bime? I believe it was a lordless city run by a system of merchants, correct? It's a trade point between numerous territories. That's exactly why. It isn't managed by a country, and it's an easy land to thrive in for adventurers. Or course, that can also be said for criminals. There are plenty of adventurers who turn into criminals. When that happens, they get banishment notices from the Adventurers Guild, and become wanted men. But once they fled to the trade point of Bime, no country could openly try to hunt them down. I had heard stories of it, but I'm a bit hesitant to aim to settle in such a land. It appears Zell sensed my sentiment. I don't think you need to pay too much mind to it. As long as you don't venture into places where those sorts gather, you'll rarely get tangled up in their affairs. I see. I thought the imperial capital would be a good start in and of itself, though. Even on the Walt house's territory, there's an adventurers' guild. But my father, the feudal lord, could interfere with that one, so I must avoid it at all costs. If I wanted to stay within the country, I would have to pick a place without father's influence. If you think about it like that, the capital was the natural choice. Among the high-ranking nobles of the capital, there are plenty of houses that are involved with our own. It isn't a bad option, but I can't say it's the best for you. I see. But I don't have the travel expenses to reach Bime. Also, I also want to see just how far my current skill level will reach. Heim was the city of merchants. At the same time, there are plenty of adventurers there seeking employment. To summarize, if you aren't capable enough, you won't be able to survive. Truly. Then perhaps stopping by the capital first may be your best bet. I won't recommend staying for long, though. Where is there besides the imperial capital? As I had the opportunity, I inquired further. Having run around the battlefield alongside my grandfather, I thought Zell would know of various lands. I had never conversed with him before, but when I tried it, he was an old man who told interesting stories. How about the city of Dalian near the capital? It's not a hard place to live. Dalian? I've only ever heard the name. As a territory, their development is behind ours. In that regard, it may be easier to find work there. Work? You don't mean monster extermination? As I said that, the corner of his eyes sharpened as he seemed mildly amazed. Well, it seems you don't often hear of how society works over here, young master. There's no helping it, so let me explain. Zell began explaining just what it was that adventurers were. According to my mental image, they mainly dived into labyrinths, and occasionally fought on the battlefield as hired swords. But according to him, adventurers are ones who can accomplish any sort of job. At the start, they did carry out monster extermination and challenging labyrinths, but it turns out there were a lot of odd jobs to be had. Most youngsters there take on miscellaneous tasks to earn up money to purchase the necessary equipment. Is that so? But there must be people who specialize in the odd jobs too, right? Things like that are managed by the guild taking applications, and paying for services by the day. Well, it's just like an employment service. Like that, the guild looks out for the citizens around it. Of course, you could just call it earning through physical labor. Zell described the face of adventurers I didn't want to hear about. As I thought, there's no guarantee that everything will work out smoothly. But by doing those menial jobs, adventurers prepare their equipment. It's not always a bad thing, so finding fault in it would be more troublesome to the adventurers themselves than the guild. Is that how these things work? I'm none too knowledgeable. To me, who was raised with the sole purpose of ruling, there's no doubt it's a world I can't even imagine. For some reason, Zell seemed just a little bit happy. What is it? Nothing. Well, I've been serving since the time of the previous generation, but I never thought I would get to talk with the young master like this. It's because the current head had been born into a count's family. During my grandfather's reign, the Walt house finally reached counthood. The generation before him was badmouthed quite a bit for expending a lot of money to buy vast expanses of land, it seems. Even now, my father speaks of it with regret. Father's grandfather, my great-grandfather, was apparently a person who resorted to quite some underhanded methods. From a start like that, father was raised up as the head of a count's house. My grandfather had started out as a viscount, but he still led an army, and had fighting experience. I guess father never had any contact with Zell. By the way, young master, have you experienced anything strange while in my house? Something strange? No, I was about to answer nothing to his question. Compared to being driven out of my own house, I feel that everything else generally didn't mean anything. But there, I remembered. An abyss of death? I think I heard my grandfather's voice. A nostalgic tone, but there were other voices as well. I may have just been dreaming, though. Saying it was just a dream, I started to eat again. With his eyes wide open, Zell continued to look at me. The next morning, I put on the clothes I borrowed from Zell, and wore a cloak over that. It's clothing that my son left behind, but the build should fit well enough. I'm truly sorry for all of this. I'll definitely repay this debt. I said an apology, but Zell shook his head. No, you've done more than enough. Also, young master, take this. Saying that, he handed over a leather bag. In the bag that could fit in the palm of my hand, I found some coins. No, taking money from you is a bit. To me, it looked like a small sum, but it was probably different to Zell. I understand that our sense of money is completely different, so I refused to take it. However, Zell pushed it at me. You'll definitely find it necessary. What do you plan to do without a penny on you? Also, if you plan to return it at some point, just think of it as an investment, but... Having been told that, I said my thanks, and accepted it. Sorry. Really, about everything. It's fine. With this, I've finally been able to fulfill my promise to the previous head. Promise? As I tilted my head, Zell presented a small wooden box to me, and opened it up. In it was a blue gem. Silver decorations were applied all around it, and at a glance, I could tell that expensive craftsmanship had been put into it. No, there's no way I could take something this. This was the previous head's, and gem that's been passed down through each generation of the Walt house. It was crafted with an extremely scarce metal, and forged by a renowned blacksmith. A famous artisan applied the finishing touches. I looked at the gem that was about 2 centimeters across. It had been fastened to a necklace. My grandfather's? I do remember him having something like that, but shouldn't my father have received it? The previous head tried adding more ornaments onto it to make it more fitting of a count's house, but his passing came at a bad time. When the gem was to be embedded into it, I departed to confirm it, and from there, I took it back. However, I wasn't able to get an audience with Maisel-sama. Father is also busy. Because of that, unless it's an extremely urgent matter, even one who serves in the house may be unable to meet him. Even more so that it was the source of some of his worries, Zell. From the wooden box, I took the gem and chain. The gem, an item that's manufacturing process had been lost in the passage of years, was one that held a memory of an individual's skill. The specific details were lost when the world changed over to simple magic tools, and forgotten. The number of skills that can manifest in an individual was always one. While they could hone that skill over their lives, it was impossible to increase their numbers. The gem held a memory of such a skill, and made it so that others could use it. And I doubt I'll be able to ever give this to the current head, Maisel-sama. This may be my selfish decision, but please take it, young master. Lyle-sama. That way, I'll be able to repay my debt to the late count. I hung it around my own neck, and gripped the gem. I'm truly thankful, Zell. I'll definitely come back someday to repay you. I'll be waiting, Lyle-sama. Saying that, I departed from Zell's hut. In the past 6 days, Zell felt the room he always thought was small had suddenly gotten wider. In the past, the house he lived in with his family was also the place the previous family head Broad would stop by to hide out and have a drink. Looking at the picture that had gotten sketched in town of his wife, he whispered, "Hey, honey. With this, it feels something's been lifted from my shoulders." He lied down on the bed, and pulled over the blankets as he closed his eyes. But for him to have the same preferences as Broad-sama, that man also liked that stewed meat. What Zell remembered was the time when his house was still lively. And he remembered how he handed off Broad's gem that had been passed down in his family for generations. Broad was even older than him, and in the end, he was bedridden. The weakened form of the man whose dignity was Zell's aspiration brought tears to his eyes. Even if he knew he wasn't going to be around when the finishing touches were put on it, why did he leave it to me? But now, I've fulfilled my duty, Broad-sama. The memories of when he was young, and running alongside the man on the battlefield revived within him. But it truly is a blessing that I was finally able to give it to Lyle-sama in the end. Honey, I'll be off to you soon. After a single deep breath, a peaceful smile broke out on the old man. Having left the mansion and arrived at the city that was built around it, I talked with a peddler along the walls that surrounded it. Noon had passed, and if I was able to hitch a ride on a traveling cart, I would be able to get to another town to rest. To a rest town? That's fine by me, but we'll be arriving at night, and there's no telling if there'll be rooms open, you know. I have some connections to get me a place, but this time of year's going to be quite crowded. The peddler indicates his disapproval, but to me, this was a land I wanted to depart from as soon as possible. That doesn't matter to me. Can you give me a ride? I don't care either way, but can you fight? If you can't, then since you're going to be using my cart, I'm going to be charging. On the merchant's question, I created some flame in the palm of my hand. I had lost my saber, but I can still use magic. With this, I've proven I'm at least strong enough to fend for myself. How surprising. If you're a magician, does that make you a noble? No, looking at your attire. Oh my, that's an unnecessary inquisition on my part. Understood. If you're going to put my cart as a priority, and guard it carefully, I won't charge a fee. No, more so, based on what happened, I may even end up paying out. The middle-aged man displayed the palm of his hand, indicating his acceptance of me riding alone. Thank you. It's about after the rest town, but... There, a voice rose up to break me and the peddler's conversation. As I turned around, I saw an individual I knew relatively well standing there. You, please take me as well. A girl with her side ponytail as her defining characteristic. Novum. The girl hanging her head in embarrassment's name was Novum Forxes. I, in all honesty, don't know how to Romanize to make it actually look plausible. A girl of a baron's family. Also, I'll tack a former onto it, but she was the girl who was once my fiancée. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Volume 1 Chapter 2, Former Fiancé Novum. For those mathematically challenged, Lyle's technically the 9th generation. The first section, first generation on the talk, is about Lyle figuring out what he wants to do in life. Former Fiancé Novum. I turned my eyes to the girl sitting across from me on the cart. As I glanced at her, I saw her look at me too. Our eyes met, and both of us turned away. Such innocence. The middle-aged peddler laughed as he looked over at us. Her name was Novum Forxes. Her hair was done in a side ponytail, and it suited her long light brown hair quite well. I'll bet there's some provisions for travel inside of her leather, rectangular bag. Perhaps she chose something easy to move in, but she wasn't in a dress, as I usually saw her. She was wearing thick-soled boots, and she looks like a taller older sister of her usual self. Her reserved expression showed signs of tension for the first time today. I asked in a voice low enough so that the peddler wouldn't be able to make it out. How did you know? Also, trying to follow me, are you sane? Am I a bother? The girl giving a troubled expression was from a baron's house. Naturally, with me being of count status, the arranged marriage wouldn't work out status-wise. But the Forxes' house was one that had served the Walt house for many generations. The marriage for the girl that held that title, when proposed to my parents, was accepted when I was 13 because it was a pain for them to deal with. Ordinarily, it's the house of higher status that brings up such talks, or at the very least, they study the house that proposed it. Wrong. I was kicked out, you know. Following someone like me is something only a fool would do. Following someone who lost everything will be of no profit to either her, or the Forxes' house. For a proper noble, the best interest of one's house should be one's priority. There are those who aren't normal like that, but those ones are the minority. And I couldn't think of Novum as one of that minority. Since our ages were close, we often saw one another. I also have some memories of us playing together. But from the point where my parents started neglecting me, I don't remember us ever talking much. It's because to earn my parents' praise, I desperately immersed myself in nothing but training and studies. Yes, it is a bother. And here I thought I would be living a lone and free lifestyle from here on. If I say something harsh to her, she may turn back. Thinking that, I voiced something that wasn't on my mind. Novum was never a romantic dreaming girl, and even if you compare her to the Walt family's precepts, she was definitely a passing bridal candidate. I deeply apologize. But I have decided to marry Lyle Sama. To the girl giving a smile, I delivered some crucial information. I have no such will. I'll become an adventurer, and live a willful life being waited on by women. Being driven away by my family actually makes me feel relieved. The worst sermon. With this, Novum should be tired of me. As I thought that, I looked down. I didn't want to see Novum's scornful face, but as I decided that wouldn't advance the conversation, I looked up at her again. Don't worry, it's something I arbitrarily decided for myself. Even if we don't marry, please allow me to serve by your side. I put my face in my hands. What about House Forxus? You'll make your parents sad. As I brought up her own home, Novum offered a response full of self-confidence. Don't worry about that part. I'm the second daughter, and my brother is the one succeeding the house. I even have an elder and younger sister, so my parents sent me off saying that it would somehow work out if I alone was freed of obligations. The hell's wrong with you, Mother and Father Forxus? My head was starting to hurt. Even if you call her a sideliner, Novum still got decent looks. To add on to that, she was strictly disciplined, and quite refined. Even if she doesn't say anything, I'll bet there were marriage proposals to her. It's possible she could have even gotten married off to a viscount's family. Having finally gotten the happiness she wanted, it's a waste if she were to render it futile for my sake. Simply because I had known her from my childhood, I wanted her to be happy. But the individual's own will was quite rigid. Come to think of it, she had those stubborn parts back when she was small too. Just do whatever you want. As I turned my face away, Novum put her hand to her mouth, and smiled. Then I'll do just that. As if he had heard our voices, the merchant spoke up. It sure is nice to be young. That alone is a fortune, you know. It sounds like he heard all that quite clearly. My face turns red from embarrassment. But at that time, I heard a voice. Oi, hoy, you're quite loved, ain't ya, kid? I heard a voice with a teasing tone. I looked around. On top of the cart, there was only me and Novum. The peddler was holding the reins up front. Around our wagon, there were similar travelers and merchants out searching for work, but they weren't at a distance where a voice would reach. Novum, did you hear anything? A voice that seemed to be trying to tease? On my question, she shook her head. I apologize. I didn't hear it. As she apologetically lowers her head to me, I tell her not to mind it, as I survey the area once more. The voice sounded male, and it was quite a firm one at that. But while I can see some males here and there, there's not at a distance where it would be that clear. What's more, I had the impression that the voice had come from somewhere much closer. A hallucination? Am I still tired? Come to think of it, I've been finding it hard to get over fatigue lately. Is it because my wounds aren't fully recovered? I recall that it seemed vaguely familiar as I look up. As I traced the roof of cloth the peddler had put up with my eyes, I shut them. As long as I'm the only one who heard it, then it may just be that I've been mentally pressed. Are you alright, Lyle-sama? As Novum sounded worried, I opened my mouth. As I was about to tell her I was fine, I heard another voice from close by. I could hear it quite crisply, but Novum didn't appear bothered by it. For him to have someone like that at his age. I can't be anything but jealous. You sure went through a lot, Father. From a sitting position, I raised myself and looked around. Novum looked shocked. What's wrong, Lyle-sama? But the surroundings hadn't changed in the slightest. It's nothing. As I said that, I thought. Am I really that tired? I guess I'll sleep for now. After arriving at the rest town, we consulted with the peddler and got him to agree to let us accompany him tomorrow as well. Perhaps it was a seasonal occurrence, but the town was quite lively. After confirming the peddler's departure time, me and Novum went off in hunting. But there, a problem emerged. There's only one room? 2 are impossible? After the inn's owner confirmed the fact, he immediately told us it was impossible. There are too many people this time of year, so we can't be putting a single person to a room. I'm sorry, but if you're acquaintances, can you both put up with sharing a room? I turned to Novum. She had chosen to follow me, but being in the same lodging as her was something I wanted to avoid. As I was taught as such, I was bewildered on how to deal with the man. But Novum simply told him it didn't matter either way, and paid for it. She handed him some copper coins in exchange for the key. Oi! Before I could ask her if that was all right, the inn's owner spoke. The room is on the far side of the second floor. The room number is on the paper attached to the key. Oh, right, breakfast and hot water's free, but we don't do dinners, so you should probably find somewhere to eat before you leave your luggage. I didn't understand what he meant by before you leave your luggage. If there's a key, then wouldn't it be better to just leave it? I'm a separate matter, but Novum's carrying a traveling bag. She was carrying some heavy baggage, but I thanked the owner anyways. Thank you. What should we do about the key? You've already paid me, and I'm not going to play oblivious about it later. I'll hold on to it, so take this note with you. If you give it to whoever's here, they'll hand over the key. I had some questions as to why we needed to carry out this exchange, but Novum dragged me out. We exited the inn, and got to looking for food at a nearby place that I couldn't whether it was a bar or restaurant. There were many people on the roads, and it really was a noisy town. Wait a second, isn't this kid really too wet behind the ears? He's way too oblivious to how this world works. It's because he's a count. It's because Lyle's going to be a count in the future. Well, it's true that he's been rich from the moment he was born. He's a tried and true pampered brat. Within the clamor of the crown, I heard a clear voice again. It definitely sounded close, and my name was even brought up. Are you alright, Lyle-sama? Your complexion is a little pale. I am fine. My impatient voice came out quite loud. It sounds like Novum didn't hear anything. The voices started coming again. And wait a goddamn moment, go take the girls' bags already. You're pretty much empty-handed, kid. You truly are inconsiderate. Count, was it? I guess the child of something like that turns out like this. He's on the side that's used to getting taken care of. What did you say? I heard it again. And it's coming from really close to me. What's more, each and every voice is different. There are multiple of them. Lyle-sama? In order to not trouble Novum, who looked worried, I opted to ignore them. But it really is wrong for the girl to be carrying along a heavy bag while I don't have anything. Why yeah. Novum, isn't that heavy? I'll carry it. Saying that, I took her bag. While she insisted that she would carry it, I took it slightly forcefully as we entered the restaurant. But then they came again. He should have taken her hand and escorted her. When we entered the place, I heard a voice like that. An image of me offering my hand to her flashed across my mind for an instant. No, wait, we're already in the store, giving her my hand now holds no meaning. As I was lost in thought with my hand extended, I was left in a flustered state in front of her. As if she sensed that, Novum took my hand. Lyle-sama, that seat looks open, so can I trust you to guide me there? Why yeah. As I escorted her the short distance, Novum offered a final thanks. Much appreciated, Lyle-sama. Excuse me. Saying that, Novum went and called over the waiter to order without hesitation. She asked what was recommended from the menu, and ordered 2 portions. She pointed to some things, and asked whether they were fine with me, and I merely affirmed without any idea of what I was going to be served. There, I heard the voices again. Hey, isn't this guy a bit of a wimp? It's because he's oblivious about the world. Well, he does have some unreliable spots too. Here, it's fine because the girl's being considerate, but a normal one dump him, right? As my evaluation was steadily dropping, I thought to myself. Just what is it with this situation? Night. After returning to the inn, I accepted the hot water the owner had prepared for us. Apparently, I was to wipe my body with the hot water in the bucket. There's no bath? Novum answered my question. Even in this rest town, there are some places that offer it based on price, but it's standard to simply wipe down your body with hot water. Even in inns with baths, there are few with public ones for guests to use freely. Really? I heard in town that there were some private rooms with baths, though. Novum had a troubled face as she dipped the towel in the bucket and wrung it out. She had me take off my clothes and started wiping me down. Inns that have private baths are ridiculously expensive. They're at a level where they charge silver coins per night, but I have some silver, though. Novum, are you sure you're alright without a bath? As I said that, she cautioned me. That's no good, Lyle-sama. From now on, money is going to be scarce. If you don't economize when you have the chance, it'll run out before you know it. Really? As she scolded me, she finished washing my back and moved to my hair. After lifting the bucket over my head, Novum gently poured it over me. I heard a fed-up voice. Oi, spoiled brat, when your body's clean, leave the room at once. What's wrong, Lyle-sama? I heard a threatening voice, so I started looking around at once. As my hair was wet, water flew around. It's no good, this kid, he doesn't notice it at all. I don't think there's too much of a problem, though. I reassured a worried Novum that nothing was wrong as I waited for my hair to be washed and put on my clothes after. I wanted to change them, but I was unable to replace anything but my undergarments. Then I'll be using it next, alright? She seemed to want to say something. Why yeah. I'll be leaving then. I'm just outside the door if you need me, why do I have to get out? I deeply apologize. Saying that, I left the room, and found a chair in the corridor. As I sat on the creaking wood, I didn't hear anyone talking to me. Is it really a hallucination? And wait, today's already. As I was sitting, my eyelids began to feel heavy. Like that, I closed my eyes. Perhaps because my body had been cleaned, I felt relieved. Wake up, you bastard. I heard an angry voice, and when I opened my eyes, I was in a different place than before. What? What's more, there were people around me. A large, circular table extended before me, and 7 other individuals were seated around it. Each of them held a different shape, and they were all faces I had some recollection of. Where did I see them? As I thought that, I noticed a man wearing beast skins as a vest. His arms were thick like a log, and his hair was unkempt. Around him were men that seemed to be of better upbringing. All of them ranged from their late 20s to early 30s in appearance. I turned my attention to the savage tribesman-like man before me. Could it be that voice was? That's right, that was us. Among them, there was a man I had a clear recollection of. Unlike in my memory, he was quite young. However, his atmosphere hadn't changed. Lyle. Grandfather. There was the youthern form of my grandfather. His spine was straighter, and his body was much more firm than I remembered. You've grown this big. I'm happy for you, Lyle. His atmosphere was still that of a welcoming grandparent. The other individuals lined up seemed resentful, or uninterested, or just fed up. As they looked at me, it seems they each had their own evaluations. My grandfather spoke up. Do you guys have any complaints to voice against my grandson? The one to return an answer was the savage-styled man. Of course I do. What's with this frail pansy? There's no way in hell my bloodline would produce a man as wimpy as this. Be bloodline. I couldn't grasp the situation. And since my grandfather's here, couldn't this be a dream? As I thought that, a different one let out their voice. No, isn't it fine like this? And wait, more importantly, there's something I'd like to ask. Lyle, was it? I'm your great-grandfather. The red-haired, and slightly wild-looking man had a tidy appearance. But his clothing was slightly worn down. I remembered the portraits inside my own home. Those pictures of each preceding generation of family heads were stuck up around the manor. A few of them gave off quite a different impression, but most of them were reminiscent of them. The irritated savage spoke up. You sure are slow on the uptake. Least stand here. We're yo goddamn ancestors. Sitting next to him, a man in hunter-esque clothing softly mumbled. You may not want to accept it, but this one's the provincial nobleman, the founder of the Walt house. You don't really have to respect him or anything. Wah? I'll bet that I'm currently making quite a pathetic face right now. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Volume 1, Chapter 3, The 7 Ancestors. The 7 Ancestors. After falling asleep in a chair in the hall, I found myself in an unfamiliar room with my ancestors. Why am I in a situation like this? Even I was unable to understand it. And wait. In the center of the room was a wide, circular table, and our seats encircled it. The chairs were large, and the backrest's height exceeded my head. They were seats appropriate of the high-class atmosphere of the room, but for some reason, some part of them lacked a sense of reality. Around the room, circular blue orbs were embedded in various places. In the center of the table, a pale, glowing one existed. It was a mistake in your upbringing of him. It's not me. In the first place, the Walt house is a male lineage, and what's more, Lyle was officially set to be successor already. It's definitely not my fault. If I was there when it happened, I would have smacked my son upside the head a few times. The savage man and my grandfather gripped each other's clothing as if to fight. At a glance, it seems the savage man was superior, but the reactions from the rest of them were cold. They abandoned the two, and returned to their conversation with me. From the hunter-garbed man from before, I sought an explanation. Let's leave the two loud ones, and continue. Anyways, Lyle was set to be the 9th generation, but having lost to his sister, and having had the right to succeed taken from him, he was driven out of the house. There's quite a few problems with the story already, but let's leave that aside for now. He tried to move on, but there, the savage-styled man, provincial noble, and the founder of the Walt house, who spearheaded a group to cultivate the land, 1st generation, Basil Walt opened his mouth. There's no way I can let that one slide. The one who lost to a girl younger than himself was the next heir? Don't screw with me. You barbarian! What are you saying to my grandson? My grandfather punched him into the air, but still, the reception was cold. But in the cold air, the hunter. Second generation, Lyle Walt casually ignored them. The problem lies elsewhere. Both of you, take a seat. Now then, normally, we would be against a woman succeeding the house. At the very least, I wouldn't have accepted one as head, regardless of how proficient she may be, and I doubt my opinion will change. The second's opinion was agreed with by the third. Third generation, Lyle Walt. He wore the clothing of a low-ranking nobleman, and he gave off a somewhat frivolous feeling. Right, I mean, I was able to become head myself, and my son Max was head, even though I had a daughter too. Third generation Slay was the first of the Walt house to be killed in battle. But the image of him that was passed down was that of a righteous commander, who headed up the rear guard as the king issued a retreat. He's said to be a man who, alone, defended an army of tens of thousands. The man in front of my eyes didn't give off an impression like that at all. Oi, you died before you became the head of anything, didn't you? Just how much troubles did you think I had to go through because of that? This one was also wearing a noble's vestments. But just like the second generation, he had the aura of a wise man. Fourth generation, Max Walt was the leader when the Walt house reached baronhood. And the fifth generation gave a sigh. Fifth generation, Fredericks Walt was supposedly the most lustful of the Walt family. Even with a wife, he apparently had 4 mistresses. But unlike my mental image of him, he didn't give of such a laid-back air. Ha, quit it. Everyone has their troubles. Of course, I did as well. There, the red-haired, wild-looking, sixth generation nodded. Sixth generation finds Walt was the individual who used underhanded means to elevate the house to count status. My father kept an image of him around, and whenever something bad happened to the Walt family, he would take it out and complain at it. Right. But for the reason the daughter became the heir to be a fencing match. Broad, are you really sure you didn't fail in teaching that one? Seventh generation, Broad Walt was my grandfather. My son was quite excellent, even from my eyes. Also, from last I remember it, Lyle was supposed to be the next in line, and Seal should have just been receiving training as a noble lady. Before my eyes, I saw my ancestors, and they were arguing amongst themselves. Even this far, it wasn't something I fully understood. Having heard my story, the second generation came to a conclusion. Frankly, man, it's totally ain't happening, right? His easygoing tone earned approval from the surroundings. Right. That's right. That stupid son of mine. He's got a beating coming to him. And finally, the talk turned back to me. This time, the one who gave off the same aura as the second generation, the fourth generation, asked me. That's what I've been wondering. I mean, even if Lyle lost to her, I don't really have an idea about her competence. Is that Seal's girl really that overflowing with grace? Having been asked about Seals, I looked at the ground. I didn't want to bring her up in my mind, but I'll bet I'll have to explain it. If I'll have to do it eventually, I should get it over with now. Thinking that, I started explaining about Seals. My sister 2 years my junior, and a girl who could accomplish anything. Whatever I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours to attain, she learned in only a few. And the most important thing was, my sister is perfect. Studies are one thing, but on top of that, should I call the atmosphere around her immaculate? Atmosphere? And what the hell is perfect? Making a woman the successor will put us at quite a disadvantage politically, right? She must have something great enough to compensate for that. The barbaric first generation, who was sitting cross-legged on the table, bit onto my discussion. She can charm anyone. My parents did look over me at the start. But around the time I turned 10, the atmosphere began to turn strange, and gradually, the atmosphere of the whole mansion began to center around Seals. After I said that much, the first generation seemed lost in thought. The fourth generation regained the lead, and started the conversation up again. Meaning she had talent exceeding Lyle, and those around her recognized that? Does that sound plausible, seventh generation Kuan? My grandfather tilted his head. No, while I did find her cute as my granddaughter, her being that great is, as I thought, impossible. My grandfather denied it. I was of the same opinion. At the time when my grandfather was still alive, the atmosphere in the mansion was normal. I wasn't on particularly bad terms with my sister, either. So around the time she was 7 or 8, the atmosphere changed. Then it could be that a skill manifest in her. That's about when those things start popping up, at earliest. That opinion was denied by the third. I wonder. Even if it manifested, there are plenty of cases where it goes unnoticed. Even if it's there, people only become able to put it to practical use around 10. Meaning the timing is a bit of a stretch? I mean, Lyle himself's got a skill on him, but it seems he still hasn't noticed it. Skill. To the humans that lived in this world, they were a divine grace separate from the magic afforded by the gods. There's a general rule that it's one skill per person, and it is the human way to battle to polish that skill. Of course, in the past, it was possible to recreate them with technology. Of all else, the gem I received was given a skill by a head of the past. Wait a second. I started hearing the voices around when I started being taken care of in Zell's hut, right? Then I started to hear them more clearly, from when I received the gem. Noticing it, I raised my head. As if to imply that it had taken me long enough, the third generation spoke. He also informed me of the skill I received. It didn't take definite form, but the gem reacted to it to try and store it. That's why, since we've all been recorded within this gem, we can sense it. I tried confirming with the surprisingly knowledgeable third generation on what skill I had. So in the end, just what is my skill? I don't know that far. But blue gems hold support skills, so it's probably one of those. Skills are generally sorted into 3 categories. Ones with close combat as its base, Vanguard. These ones were said to manifest in red gems. Yellow gems held rearguard skills. Blue was support. Those are the 3 classifications of skills, but in the past, it was said one could control the direction of their own skill, to some extent, with gems. The reason support skills were common in the Walt house was because they carried blue gems on them. So that makes me support? You sound unsatisfied. But back in my time, support was all the rage. The third generation started at my displeased face as he spoke. In the current era, it's the high firepower rearguard skills that are preferred. But in my time, it was Vanguard and support. Getting a rearguard was unfortunate. As my grandfather said that, the second generation gave a questioning look. In my time, support was misfortune. Does it just change by the times? The fourth returned the derailed conversation to the track. Anyways, you say the possibility of some sort of skill manifesting in that seals girl, and making them change their decision is low. That would mean that Lyle really didn't have the caliber necessary to be the heir. Even when told something like that, I couldn't say anything. I did exert myself desperately, but never once had my hard work made anyone tell me I was fitting as the next head. In the Walt house, that had become the home of account. If you're told you lack the necessary wisdom to succeed the title, then that's the end of it. But it's just too strange. Looking at their reception to the boy, he wasn't that bad. I mean, even now, he has a reliable retainer with him, and even if Lyle's not that reliable, it's just normal for a boy to be chosen as an heir. Even if that girl called Seals is simply overflowing with talent, the demerits of naming her the successor are too high. The fifth generation disinterestedly spoke of the demerits of having a female head. But in truth, there were already a few houses with such leaders. However, the main reason was representation, and the customs of the house. In houses with female lineage, it's not rare for there to be talks of a male becoming an heir, but the reverse isn't often heard of. I mean, if the time calls for it, the family head must march out into battle. The number of houses that would dispatch a girl in such a situation was scarce. I won't say there are none, but still, they're the great minority. Broad, what about the vassals? Was there any faction gathering around her in a plot to take control of the house? On the sixth's proposal, my grandfather started thinking. I won't say there were none with such intentions, but the social status of the vassals is too low. It's impossible for them to plan to take control by marrying in. The closest house of status to us is the patriarchal Forks' house, but they've never done anything like that since times long ago. There, the second generation reacted. Your retainers are those Forks'? The first, who had been lost in thought, also stood up in confusion. By Forks', you mean those ones? The ones from the neighboring territory. That's the old man's house, ain't it? Old man? I didn't know what was going on at all. From long ago, the Forks' house was subservient to the Walt house. They were something like our retainer house. Their status was that of barons, but their land was afforded to them by my parents' Walt house. The fourth generation was also flustered. But the fifth? What of it? I mean, we climbed up in rank, and obtained control of the neighboring territories. For the Forkses that were hesitant to move, we graciously gave them land, so it's natural for them to be our retainers, right? But there, the second generation shouted out. Don't joke around. Just how far in debt do you think we are to those guys? You all, if the Forks' house wasn't next door to us, none of us would be here. The second emphasized just how much they had taken care of us, as the fourth asked the fifth with a surprised face. What's the meaning of this? I told you, right? They had assisted us greatly, so you were to make sure to keep good relations with them, right? There, the fifth gave a disinterested reply. Yeah, and that's why I filled out all the paperwork so the Forks' house could rise in status as well. I definitely did it, right? As the fifth sought confirmation from the sixth generation nodded. Well, yeah. You did. While listening to this exchange, I thought. This is getting a bit complicated. And wait, their voices seem to be getting a little distant. And here, I heard the voice of someone that wasn't there. Lyle-sama? Lyle-sama, I've already finished. Yeah. When I opened my eyes, I was still sitting in the creaky and wobbling chair. Perhaps because I was tired, I had slept quite soundly. Having wiped down her body and washed her hairs, Novum stood in front of me. I see you were tired. I've washed your undergarments in the hot water and hung them to dry. They should be done by tomorrow. Sorry about that. As I stood up, my footing was unsteady. Novum supported my body as we proceeded towards the room. Was all of that a dream? As I thought that, the first generation's voice rang out. Wait a second, what's that child's surname? I'm starting to get curious. The air around her is a little familiar. And I heard my grandfather as well. She's grown quite big, but that's the second daughter of the Forks' family. I never thought she would become Lyle's fiancé. I mean, their statuses were just too separated. Waha-ea. The first raised a scream. It was really loud, but it still looks like Novum doesn't hear anything. So it wasn't a dream. As I mumbled, Novum tilted her head. What's the matter, Lyle-sama? But more importantly, this tired feeling is unbearable. I'm even more fatigued than before, and walking is a pain. I've never experienced being this tired before. After Novum led me to the bed, I laid down on the spot and immediately fell asleep. The last I heard was Novum's kind voice. When I laid down, she pulled the covers over me. Good night, Lyle-sama. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Volume 1, Chapter 4, Monster. Monster. I was severely tired, but after waking up, I endured the sleepy feeling and ate breakfast. The food served by the inn was something I wouldn't call tasty even if I was trying to flatter, but perhaps because it was warm and my body was craving something to eat, I felt it was delicious. Looking at my figure, Novum seemed relieved. You looked terribly tired yesterday, but it looks like you're fine today. Your complexion isn't bad anymore. After waking up, I was completely in Novum's care. She washed my face, brushed my teeth, and even set my hair. I get the feeling I heard the first generation crying out multiple times, but most of them were shouts for me to stop relying on her. Brushing teeth, why does that sound lewd to me? For some reason, he was quite conscious of Novum. It wasn't just the first. All those prior to the fourth generation. First, second, third, and fourth were all somewhat soft on her. Fifth and onwards recognized her family as a vassal one, and didn't say anything as she took care of me. It seems I can't shake off this fatigue, but I'm better than yesterday. We'll be moving all throughout today, so let's finish with shopping and wait for the wagon at the gates. That's right. We have a flask already, so we'll have to buy preserved foods and other expendable items. Novum had some preparations, but I barely had any luggage. The peddler told me even if I was trying to travel, I was way too lightly equipped. Let's buy our consumables here and choose some weaponry in the next town. I was completely unarmed. There were machetes in Zell's place, but no knives. Walking around with one of those was a bit off, so I planned to buy a weapon somewhere. Do you think they'll have a saber? Novum makes a bit of a complicated expression. She was probably remembering the saber I used to use. As long as it's a sharp blade, they'll probably stock it. It's just that, concerning weapon quality, I'm not really all that. She gave an apologetic look, but in the past, she used to study holy attribute magic. Unlike me, she earnestly pursued just the path of a mage, so she could use complicated holy spells. Naturally, she could use other magics as well. You didn't bring a staff? The one you used to carry around was a magic tool, right? Magic tools were weapons with skills sealed into them. As people were only able to hold a single skill individually, they were needed in order to use multiple ones. Right now, rather than gems, these were the popular trend. I deeply apologize. I left that one with the Forks' house. It was something that could be called an heirloom, and it would be uncouth for me to make off with it for my personal matters. But even like this, I may not be up to Lyle Sama's level, but I have studied magic. I'll show you how useful I am. I see. The 5 elements, and 2 divine. Those were the basis of magic. On top of the 5 great elements of nature, fire, water, earth, wind, and lightning, the 2 attributes called the 2 divine, holy and dark, also existed. As long as one was a noble, it wasn't rare for one to be a magician capable of using those elements. Those who broke off from the upper echelon of society were often magicians as well, and apart from that, especially among houses of knight status, there were nobles who were unable to use magic. Favorite elements differed by the person, but even so, it was standard for any magician to be able to manipulate them all to some extent. It was just that Novum advanced her studies through specialization on a single point. How diligent, what a nice girl. I heard the first generation's voice. After learning that Novum was of the Forks' house that looked after him, he blatantly started favoring her. Based on the conversations of my ancestors, the Walt house was in a debt of gratitude to the Forks' house that was well over repayable, it seems. But perhaps because of the flow of time, the Walts started treating the Forkses as vassals. Apparently, the first few generations were unable to excuse that fact. Perhaps the second and fourth generations were especially looked after, as they both kept telling me to treat Novum with care. They were quite loud. Lyle, try a little harder on your own, why don't you? You're relying on Novum-chan too much. The second generation said as such, but I have no idea what I'm supposed to do about that. And wait, since they took good care of my ancestors, I'm not the only one who relied on them, right? I couldn't break into an argument with them in front of Novum's eyes, so I ignored them and continued my own conversation. Today, we'll stop by a nearby village, and after that, we'll arrive at our destination city. Henceforth, we'll exit the territory's border on foot, I guess. On my opinion, Novum voiced some disapproval. That sounds fine, but I think it would be best if we departed alongside the main body of merchants. If it was us alone, we'll stand out too much, and we'll make for an easy target. It seems my opinion was really that bad, as the first generation stuck his voice in. Why don't you understand something so basic? This boy's been raised much too sheltered. The Walt house's selling point is the wildness of its men. The second generation countered him. Quit your nagging. You're not wild, or anything, you're just an idiot. You bastard. What sort of things you sayin' to your old man? Let's take this outside. We can't leave this place, dumbass. They're loud. Before we departed, I went around the rest town to buy the supplies we would need to travel. We stopped by another town on the way, stayed a night, and finally reached our destination point the next day. It was the town on the edge of the Walt house's territory's border, as well as an important relay point with other territories. For that sake, considering defense, it was built in close proximity to a fortress. The number of soldiers in it was also greater than in the other towns. Evening had fallen when we reached it, and the peddler offered his thanks to us. It was because in the town we stopped at on the way, we assisted with his work. It was mainly Novum who skillfully assisted him. Just a little, and wait, I was mostly just watching the whole time. Thank you for helping me back in town. We didn't meet any monsters, but please think of this as your wages. Saying that, he handed over some copper coins. Thank you. I was the one who received it, but the one who reciprocated his thanks was Novum. You sure nabbed yourself a tasteful lady there, young man. I'm envious of you. Why yeah. As I let out a vague response, the fourth generation raised his voice. Yo man, that's where you say something to raise Novum-chan's affection level. At least say, she's too good of a woman for me, or something. But there, the fifth whispered. You had quite a time getting Mom, so it's just that you won't be able to calm down if he doesn't have to say something like that, right? Good grief. What's with this people? And wait, are these guys really supposed to be my ancestors? It wasn't that I didn't want to admit it, but still, I wanted to voice a complaint or two. If you're setting Dalian as your end destination, then you guys should hitch a ride from a large city to the imperial capital. If you get that far, you'll have some peace of mind, but please be careful. The Walt House does a reliable job on subjugating monsters, but other provinces have numerous dangerous spots. We expressed our gratitude at the peddler's explanation and parted. Afterwards, Novum and I went out to search for an inn. There wasn't any leisure to do any shopping today, so I planned to spend 2 or 3 nights at the inn to get our preparations together. It seems that, through the addition of my own skill, the space in the gem was overflowing. According to the third generation, after taking in 8 skills, the gem evolved into a jewel. Jewel is written as treasure gem. Until now, it was only a device that allowed one to use skills, but like this, the ability to talk to the gem's users of the past, my ancestors, emerged, apparently. From my point of view, that part's just a pain, though. But the jewel wasn't complete. My conversations with the ancestors and the use of skills naturally needed some sort of fuel. For that, it began to use my magic. The reason my fatigue won't wear away lately is because I'm on a journey I'm not used to, and because of the jewel. Meaning the reason I get tired so easily is because the ancestors keep flapping their mouths and draining my energy. If you pile up garbage, it may become a mountain. TL, a proverb meaning the little things add up. Lyle-sama, how does this place look? Both the price and facilities are relatively good. Novum had picked out an inn, so I decided to obey her choice. And wait, I have no idea how to compare them in the first place. All of them look the same to me. It would be nice if there was a bath. I'm sorry. This one is also the type where you borrow water in a bucket. As Novum gave an apologetic face, the fourth generation snapped. There you go again with your heedless luxuries. Please stop. When you shout that loud, I can practically feel my magic draining out. The feeling of having your mana drained out arbitrarily by others was truly a detestable one. It's tough on both my body and mind. When I fell asleep at the inn, I found myself in the same room as before. The room I saw when I was called into the jewel was something like an artificially manufactured image. It was the room I used to talk with my predecessors, but at the same time, it felt like I was watching a dream. They were usually carrying out noisy debates, but today, it seemed they have something important to say. I did some thinking on my own, and the truth is, there's something that came to mind, but... As the first was saying something along those lines, the second cut him off. Having his opinion being blatantly denied, the savage-style first generation was pissed off. More importantly, shouldn't we decide some rules about our conversations? At this rate, Lyle looks like he's going to drop dead, you know. Perhaps because he was worried about my mana, the second's opinion was welcomed by my grandfather. You all are too lively. What do you plan on doing if my grandson collapses? Apparently, the ancestors were memories recorded within the jewel, and the very representation of the skills in it. It wasn't that a part of their souls were left behind or anything. They were already long dead. But as recordings, and as skills, they remained in the jewel. They maintained the form they had in their primes during life, and their personalities were also reflected, so they were pretty much no different from when they were alive, or something like that. There, the third generation spoke. We should decide a facilitator. Max, you do it. As no one else wanted to do it, the remaining members voiced their approval. No objections. Have added. I think that sounds fine. Right. Why are you guys pushing everything onto me? The fourth generation flew into a rage, but without being able to do anything to alter the flow of the room, and perhaps because he had a pessimistic personality from the start, he took it on. After that, the rule-making continued. Saying personal names, or pops, or grandfather will probably make Lyle confused, so how about we just make it uniform by saying which generation? As the third generation said that, there wasn't any particular opposition. Well then, to take Lyle's minimalistic mana reserve into consideration, how do we keep conversations to a minimum? Was I just casually dissed? The fifth generation voiced that clearly. I get the feeling he was the one with the least amount of mercy here. I mean, it's minuscule, isn't it? Just how do you go about running out of fuel after just a few shots of magic? It's at a level where it can't be used in real combat. As the ancestors continued to complain about my low mana, the rule-making ended. And wait, I'm pretty sure I've trained quite a bit, so being told it was small was actually quite unexpected. Oi, don't ignore me, people. Aren't I supposed to be the first generation of the Walt house? I'm a super VIP. Even after coming this far, none present had tried listening to anything the first generation was saying. Hearing that, the second generation gave a scornful laugh. It appeared that there was some discord between the first and second. The facilitator, the fourth generation, adjusted the positioning of his glasses as he approved the first's proposal. Weary being conscious of conserving mana here, so please keep it short, first generation. At least throw in a Sama somewhere in there. Oh, my business was with Lyle's sister. She was a perfect girlie with a certain atmosphere, was it? Lyle, there's something I'd like to ask. Sure. He was giving off a much more serious air than usual, as he stared at me in earnest. That sister of yours prettier than her age might suggest, or just a beauty, right? What's more enough that you would call it unnatural? Men must come by for her hand, right? After being told that, I thought for a bit. Despite her being only 13, she was a little sister where the word voluptuous was most fitting. Naturally, while my parents didn't approve of it, there were numerous marriage proposals. Even so, there were even men from houses with names known across the land. Let's see. For her age. I won't say her entire body was favored, but she was pretty. Rather than childishly cute, she was truly a beautiful person, appearance-wise. I see. Let me add on another, but you said the atmosphere in the manor became strange, right? Until you became 10, it was completely normal, right? And that it suddenly changed. As it was a painful memory, I silently nodded. I continued to struggle to be looked at, but that was never rewarded. There's no doubt about it. The first generation slammed his fist on the table, and grandly declared the truth he reached about my sister. Your sister. Seals is a monster. What? You, The air instantly became doubtful. While the air around him was much more diligent than usual, and the surroundings were earnestly listening to him, this was the result. The fourth generation signaled the end of today's meeting. Okay. We've decided the rules today, so let's wrap this up here. It's best if we avoid having a meeting every day, but if there's ever a need for one, we'll contact you from this side, Lyle. Yeah, please do. As I was feeling happy that my mana problem would be contained, surrounding members stood up to disperse. Since there were doors, I assumed they were exits, but it appears each ancestor had a private room. That's all folks, good work everyone. Much appreciated. Yeah, good work. Ha, just when I thought he would be serious for once, this is what happens. As they all returned to their own rooms, First shouted out. Listen to me, you bastards. I'm serious here. She's seriously a monster. By thinking that I wanted to return, it seems I was able to disappear from the room. I say some parting words and vanished. Ah, well then, until next time. God damn it. Within the meeting room-like space, the founder of the Walt House's voice resounded. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Volume 1, Chapter 5, Dalian. Dalian. Just as the peddler suggested, we hitched a carriage from a city to the capital. The road was well maintained, and the coupled carriage was pulled by a total of 6 horses. The ride wasn't bad, but getting a lift all the way to the capital cost quite a pretty penny, it seems. A sum of 5 silver coins apiece. With me and Novum together, it was a total equal to a whole gold coin. I sat and observed the scenery as I stared out the carriage. Perhaps she was tired, but Novum was sound asleep. She was leaning on me, and breathing peacefully. Has she been pushing herself? I may be worthless by myself, but it was because Novum was with me that I could get all the way here. Otherwise, I would have probably gotten there eventually, but sometime along the way, I would have ended up on foot. Having never camped out before, traveling alone was completely out of the question, according to my ancestors. I had the vague notion that I would be alright, but it seems they were all fed up with the naivety of my thought process. Even the 7th generation, my grandfather, didn't stick up for me on that one. In order not to wake Novum, I kept my eyes on the outside. As I was doing that, I heard the second's voice. Today is his day to look after me, apparently. I don't know the criterion, but while traveling, the first and second, and occasionally the fourth would start up a conversation with me. There was the problem of my mana, so having 2 talk to me at once was tiring. For that reason, they call out to me alone. UVE sure got some convenient things around these days. We didn't have this coupling system in my day. In a small voice, I answered. Is that how it was? It's because that was almost 200 years ago. Magic tools, was it? We never had anything that convenient. Magic tools were something built to replace gems. They were a much simpler way to bestow skills onto people. However, perhaps because gems were the stronger of the two, it was impossible for one to use multiple magic tools at once. It's always either one or two. But there was the problem with my mana, so right now, I can't use a magic tool. The ancestors' skills included, the current me is bearing quite a load. And the majority of them are ones I can't even use. Or should I say, the 7th generation skill was too much for me, myself to handle, so I couldn't use it. The second's was one that interacted with and affected other skills. About the first generations, because he didn't recognize me, he didn't want to let me use it. The other skills were similar. Saying my body couldn't handle it, they refused to give permission to use them. I'm in a state where I can't use any of them, aren't I? But even if they'll supply somewhere to stay along the way, is 5 silver that expensive? Apparently, my sense of money is clearly worse than I thought. Fifth generation onward, in order to live their lives as full nobles, had abandoned the sense of money of commoners. That was apparent when I was choosing a weapon. Fifth onward said the more expensive ones would last for an exponentially longer time, and had a good cost-performance ratio as they recommended a high-priced sword. But taking the money I had on hand into consideration, that proved impossible. While I was able to afford it, it would make the travels afterwards difficult, so the second and third vetoed the decision. I think it's on the cheaper side. You have a safe ride to the capital, and you've secured lodging for only 5 silver, you know? If it were me, I would be delighted. Though they probably have quite a large pool of customers to reap profits from. From a commoner's standpoint, 5 silver was a hefty sum. But because it promised for safe travels, there are quite a few who use the system. You sure live in a convenient era. After saying that, the second generation remained silent. I took the jewel in my hands and looked into it. The blue crystal was a treasure handed down by the Walt house for generations. Is it alright for something like that to be in my hands right now? I hope it doesn't become a problem. As I thought that, Novum stirred a little. I stuffed the jewel attached to a necklace back under my shirt. But Novum didn't wake. Still, for the next 5 days, we'll just be traveling like this. Around us, horse-mounted guards circled the carriage. Looking at them, the other customers seemed relieved. However, according to my predecessor's words, the skill level of the escorts wasn't all that high. That back in their day, the guards were much more skillful. A bragging contest of my generation was amazing unfolded. But that part about them bringing up their time is a little, right? Like Novum, I opted to sleep. The evening of the 5th day. Having arrived at the destination of the coupled carriages, the imperial capital, we decided to search for an inn, as it was already dark. It would be a pain once night fell, and more than anything, fatigue had built up in my body over those 5 days of travel. The unfamiliar environment was simply that hard on me. We should rest a bit, is what the ancestors proposed. For Novum's sake. Lyle-sama, are you certain? It's a bit of an expensive lodging this time. In front of our eyes was an inn that, unlike the other ones, was equipped with baths in the private rooms. Its outward appearance was, as befitting the capital city of the Bonsium Kingdom, Central, exceedingly extravagant. The air around it was completely different from the villages and towns we passed through. Let's take it easy for today, at least. It's important to heal the pent-up fatigue of a long voyage, and if I don't, the ancestors are going to get loud, aren't they? Mainly the first to the fourth. They seemed quite wary of her. If you're wondering just what it was Novum's Forks' house did for them to be that grateful. The first received extensive assistance when he was reclaiming and cultivating the abandoned settlements on his new territory, the second was imparted with their know-how on how to manage land, and they even helped him search for his bride. When the third generation was confused with his own elevation of status, they lent a hand as well, apparently. And after the third died in battle, the fourth suddenly had status thrust at him at a young age, and because of his father's efforts, the house obtained baron status under him. At that time, it was apparently the Forks' house that supported him from the shadows. To summarize, my homeland, the Walt house, would never have developed so far if the Forks' weren't there. Even so, as we've made them a vassal house, we've been unable to repay those debts. It isn't anything directly related to Novum, but their sentiments I tip my hat to. Of course, that train of thought changed heavily 5th generation onwards. Since they'd associated with each other for many years, they were under the impression that the debt was already paid off. It's just the first to fourth had direct, personal debts, so they weren't satisfied with that. And wait, after being so close, for us to not have blood relations. I'll bet there were quite a few circumstances, but anyways, the deeply connected Walt and Forks' houses had never been connected through blood. Normally, after so long, it wouldn't be strange for there to be a marriage or two thrown in there. What are you guys even doing? My house? No, my ancestors. From what I'd heard in the meeting room, I feel something vital wasn't in place somewhere. From what I'd heard by hearsay, the first generation was supposedly the one who cut open the path to Savage Land, and founded his family there. Even so, in reality, he was one who looks like he would often be mistaken for a pelt-wearing barbarian. Thank you for accompanying me this far. Well then, shall we go? Yes. We entered the inn, and found a counter by the door. It was well maintained, and the room was lighted by a magic stone-like magic tool. The clerk behind the counter cordially welcomed us. Will you be staying the night? Yeah. Even their reception was polite. I'll be able to get some rest for the first time in a while. That's what I thought. 0 points. As I was sleeping in a fluffy bed for the first in a long time, I was called to the meeting room. But there was no one there but the first generation. He gave me a grade the moment we met, and I'm not really sure how to respond upon being awarded a 0. So? Is that so? Can I go back yet? Why do you have such a low sense of competition? You're too well behaved that it's boring. But no matter what answer I return, he's going to be angry, isn't he? As I thought that, I decided to hear what the first had to say. And so, what is it? I want to get some rest in preparation for tomorrow. I know. But there was something I wanted to tell you no matter what. He seemed serious, but he may merely repeat the same monster accusations as before. I gave an unpleasant face, but his eyes were earnest. And earnestly, to me, he started talking about the creation of the kingdom. I was born around the time the kingdom was 50 years old. At that time, there were still survivors from the violent domestic turmoil that resulted. Ha, is that so? In the place where I lived, there were some soldiers who were around when the royal faction and the noble faction began warring amongst themselves, you see. Those old men would often say it, they often asked why it was they just fought as they were told at the time. I recalled the kingdom's history that spanned 300 years. As part of my training, I also studied history, and there, I learned how the country came to be. Around the time, a monarchy was acting quite corrupt, and the local nobles couldn't bear it anymore, so they raised some revolts. What they made from it was the Bonsium kingdom. Isn't that because the flames in them had died down? I think so too. But, you see, those old dogs said it was as if they were living in a dream. And at the same time, there was this high-up beauty in the royal faction. I guess there was quite a pretty woman there. Well, the current opinion on the matter is that figures like that are mostly the product of stories, and it's precisely because times and situations change that war happens. It was a revolt that happened because it was inevitable, or so I was taught. However, there was apparently a time where a single beautiful woman controlled politics as she wished. But even if a beauty like that was there, no decent country would let their politics be led around like that. It's because the core of the country was already corrupt by that time. If it's about that beautiful woman, I think I've heard about her before. But wasn't that just one of the many excuses that started it? That's wrong. They really exist, you know. Should I call it the turning points of history? At times like that, the monsters come out. Those guys are much scarier and more malicious than some monster you'd find in the forest. Still with a serious expressions, he continued to speak. You guys may think it's some idle gossip, but it really was a chaotic time. My grandparents even said there were way too many strange happenings in that era. They couldn't believe it themselves. And the one who stirred it all up was a monster? Right. A supreme beauty who ruined the country. A general a match for an army of thousands. A magician great enough to lift islands. Those guys all come out at the turning points of history. Your sister is a monster like that. To think a monster would be born of my own lineage. TL, if you don't get it, this is a metaphor. That couldn't be. As I voiced my skepticism, the first spoke. Then you think I deceived my cute son? Even if you're rotten, you're the man who was to become the next head. You must have been treated befitting of that. If you don't like something, then giving an order to change it is normal for your ilk. Also, the fact that you got the minimal treatment is your own fortune. Fortune? That's right. You know you were in a situation where it wouldn't be strange if you died, right? More so than kicking you out because they didn't like you, it would be easier on them to kill you, and feign that it was an illness. Being told that was quite a shock. I truly was in an environment where my needs were minimized. Of course, it was also one where I was never recognized. And after being told, the fact that I wasn't killed began to sound strange for the first time. Even for SEALs, who treated me as a hated figure. Finally starting to get it? You never thought it was strange before, right? Where was the charm that pulled the wool over your eyes? A monster great enough to twist your environment. You're lucky to have survived. That may just be how much your parents loved you, and resisted that monster. A monster that even altered the environment, that was SEALs, the first generation concluded. Those ones have nothing like common sense, and it may just be by a whim that you were thrown away. There's no way for me to understand a monster's feelings. But they truly do exist. The first monsters of history. I was slightly swallowed by his words. My experience with SEALs makes it something I can't laugh away. Then, is SEALs the cause of it all? I wasn't wrong? No idea about that one. By what I know about you, you're a brat oblivious to the world that causes trouble to the old man's descendants. A true spoiled brat. And I also don't know that girl known as SEALs. I only ever began to be able to speak like this when your skill manifested in here. Are really? The things I lacked a response to continued to multiply, and I could do nothing but stay silent. There, the first generation spoke. Hey, you, what do you plan on doing from here on out? Well, I'll become an adventurer, right? Wrong. In a time when the country might be swept up in turmoil, and you know it's going to happen, what is your course of action, is my question. The life of that Novum-chan's in your hands too. If you act poorly, I'll smack you, you got that? Today, I learned that there were many things I hadn't been giving thought to. I thought it would work out one way or another, but right now, I have the existence called Novum alongside me. You could say she arbitrarily tagged along of her own accord, but abandoning her isn't a possible option. I am. You need to think of yourself more. Just looking at you irritates me. Saying that, the first generation headed off to his room. He opened the door and slammed it behind him with all his might. Having been left in the meeting room, I thought for a while about what it was I should do. It's come into sight, Lyle-sama. Standing up high on the loading cart of the wagon, Novum shouted as she pointed at the city of Dalian that had come into view. Perhaps because our long voyage was finally coming to an end, Novum's expression was bright. My mood had also become lighter. I plan to exert myself as an adventurer in Dalian for the time being. Meaning our travels will be put on a temporary hold. It sure has. It doesn't look like a bad place. It didn't seem overflowing with people like the imperial capital. And I won't say it was noisy, but it was a lively city. Dalian, like Zell had told me, it was a town with the energy to drive forwards its development. I looked at the side profile of Novum's happy face as I thought. Just, what is it that I should be doing? I had been thinking about it since yesterday, but I couldn't find an answer whatsoever. Even if I wanted to consult someone, it seems that today's the first generation's turn to look over me, so even if I call out, there's no response. He must be feeling quite irritated, looking at me. The Adventurers Guild in Dalian is quite big, I hear. There's an abundance in work to be found, and it's said to be a perfect place for a novice to start out. Where did you hear something like that? When we were out shopping in the capital. It was where we were to stay for a while, so I was curious as to what sort of place it was. As Novum said that, I heard a voice from the jewel. What a good kid. She's more than you deserve. Compared to that, you didn't even try to collect information, Jay. I heard him click his tongue. Novum, I've caused you quite a bit of trouble. I'll also work hard from here on. I felt my own worthlessness as I gave my thanks to her. Don't worry about it. I'm doing this because I want to. Lyle-sama, let's work hard together. Why yeah. There, this time, the voice came from the owner of the cart, a young peddler. Shay. He clicked his tongue. The first generation as well. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Volume 1, Chapter 6, Adventurers Guild. Adventurers Guild. Dalian was a town built close to the imperial capital. In recent years, it had been overflowing with vitality, and its notable growth had become famous. Compared to the cities in the Walt territory I called home, it was small, but the feeling of energy felt from the well-ordered townscape was fresh to me. A 2-day journey to travel from the capital to the post town, huh? It sure is nice that the roads are well maintained. We moved quite fast. Post town. Having arrived in Dalian, I stretched my body and surveyed my surroundings as Novum indicated a sign posted nearby. There's a simple map here. The names of establishments are on it. How convenient, I thought as I read over it with her. On it, a building was indicated as the Adventurers Guild. Based on the arrangement of the map. Lyle-sama, isn't it that building over there? The building visible from the entrance to Dalian was higher than the 2- and 3-story buildings around it. Perimeter-wise, it was likely the biggest building as well. It looks like Dalian's Adventurers Guild was raking in quite a bit. Back home, no, it's larger than the branch on House Walt's territory. Seeing me revise my words, Novum looked as if she wanted to say something. Because of that, I forced a smile on my face. Well then, we have some time. How about we go register at the guild? Yes, Lyle-sama. I held the smiling girl's travel bag as I walked ahead. Even so, both Cell and Novum said it, but money disappears before you know it. My wallet had gotten considerably lighter. Naturally, we purchased quite a bit before we headed here. Our most expensive expenditure was likely the sword. I bought a saber, but perhaps because they rarely got requests for the type of blade, the few they stocked had a high price tag. I really have to consider our finances. And those ancestors have a fundamentally different set of values. Values vary by generation, and a sense for money is the same. Due to the finances built up over the previous generations, my grandfather, the 7th, the 6th, and the 5th, generally had a rich man's mindset. The first persisted that a man's weapon had to be an axe or blunt weapon, and he complained that a saber wouldn't be of any use. Otherwise, you could just throw the timber and ricks scattered around, right? If there are none, your hands are more than enough. He truly was the owner of a mindset overflowing with wilderness. Walking towards the conspicuous building, we saw other adventurer-esque people heading in the same direction. Their outfits were widely varied, but there were some I couldn't see as anything other than thugs among them. They hung knives at their waists, and walked in a way as if to intimidate the passers-by on the street. Adventurers usually travel with weapons on hand. The guild manages it, but if you ask if that actually lowers the crime rate among them, that's apparently not the case. I mean, a majority of them are ruffians, or perhaps mercenaries. Among them, some simply had yet to get wanted posters issued and were in hiding. The guild tried to be careful about such things, but by the look of it, it wasn't going too well. In truth, having 30 to 40% be decent adventurers was considered a good trend. There's also a large portion of people just acting as adventurers in their spare time. Well, it's just something I heard from the ancestors, though. It wasn't knowledge of my own. I only had a vague understanding of adventurers. But once I knew the true contents of them, I felt like the past me that admired them was a fool. In reality, less than 10% of adventurers were the ones children admire. We've arrived, Lyle-sama. Why is the guild's first floor a market? On the first floor of the building, which was clearly indicated on a large sign as the Adventurers Guild, was a shop-like area supported by pillars. Carts and adventurers as well as merchants came and went. And there, merchants and adventurers, and people who looked like civilians, were shopping around. Lyle-sama, that's the venue used for trade. Using the first floor, adventurers can trade in whatever monster parts or other things they brought back with them. Really? You don't hand over whatever you got to the guild? Novum gave a troubled expression. I'm none too knowledgeable, but going outside, exterminating monsters, and bringing them back is really dirtying, right? It's quite difficult if they all go into the building like that. Look, there's a bathhouse next door. If you really have an urgent matter for which you need a receptionist, you go there to remove the filth. Yes, when you think about it, turning over monster materials at the counter was definitely strange. They reek of blood and leave nasty stains. The reception desks are probably for paperwork, so it's normal for them to create another area for this. Oh, of course. I had resolved myself to work hard, but I was already showing off my ignorant ways. How many times has it been already? Will I really be fine here? With my arms full of anxiety, I headed to the reception desk on the second floor with Novum. We climbed the stairs and heeded the signs to press onwards. The second floor of the Adventurers Guild contained the reception's desk, and its counter was really wide. A line of staff members dealt with adventurers from one side. There sure are a lot. That's right. I've never been registered before, so I'm a bit nervous. From the jewel, I heard not the first, but the second's voice. That old man's gotten sulky, so I'll explain in his place. No wait, I doubt you have to worry about the guild's registration. They're quite used to dealing with newbies, I'll bet. Wouldn't it be fine if I just got the second generation from the start? To indicate that I understood, I touched the jewel once. While keeping my ears ready for the second's voice, I began to consider which line to join. Looking at it, there was a clear difference in the lines. Are those young ones fresh adventurers? Those guys were lined up at the counter with the beautiful staff member managing it. A woman with an amazing smile handled them with a happy expression. There was also an auntie who seemed used to the job, and that's where the adventurers who looked to be in a rush were lined up. The number of female staff was relatively high. There were few males on call. I was about to step into the older ladies' line, but there, the second generation stopped me. Lyle, why not just go to the shortest one? If it's the shortest one, then. As I looked for the line the second was talking about, I saw a brown-skinned, muscular male staff member with red, buzz-cut hair. With that appearance, he was quite scary. As I hesitated, the second spoke up. Don't worry. Among these ones, he's the most decent. What part of that appearance is decent? He had removed the overcoat the others wore over their clothes, and I could clearly sense the steel-like muscles under that shirt. If I get him mad, are you sure his fists won't fly? His looks made me think that. On. With. It don't keep Novum-chan waiting. Why are the first to fourth pushing Novum at me? No, I understand she's the daughter of a family that took care of them all, but... Reluctantly, I headed for the line I was told. There, Novum gave a surprised voice. You chose that receptionist? Since it was Lyle-sama, I thought you would go for the one who was processing work quickly. Yeah, that's what I thought too, at first. I couldn't say that I still thought that one was better. But Novum looked relieved. I was also going to recommend that receptionist, so it all works out fine. Eh? Really? It seems Novum was of the same opinion as the second. Yes. The way he's working seems quite courteous, and for people who are aiming for registration like us, it's best we obtain a polite impression. As she said that, the second agreed. Nice. That's exactly right. Rather than a beauty who did rough work while throwing around a smile, and one who did quick work, that you didn't know whether she was used to the job or not, you should pick the one who's, while scary looking, doing the job with kindness and courtesy. And that beauty over there ain't happening. It appeared that the second was against her, so I looked at the beauty's line. Eh? Lunch is a bit troublesome. Isn't it fine? Once your work's over, let's get something to eat. But still. She handled it with a smile, but the next person. Yes, here is your reward. You Next in line please. The treatment she gave to the adventurer with a good face and good equipment, and to the one with good equipment, but a normal face, was clearly different. Also, the normal-faced one looked troubled. Please wait. The promised reward sum was different, wasn't it? The client's evaluation was. Even if you tell me something like that. As she gave a bothered face, the adventurers lined up behind acted out. Oi! We're just as busy here. Don't make such a fuss over a few copper. As I looked over that, I resolved myself to never ever get into that person's line. That ain't happening, right? And wait, she should really be taken off the receptionist's line. Though I get the feeling that with that attitude, she wouldn't work well in the back, either. The second's evaluation was quite strict. Apparently, the beautiful receptionist was popular among newbies and flirtatious adventurers. But, her work ethic was the worst. I'm glad I didn't choose there. As I thought something like that, Novum's voice reached me. Lyle-sama, you're up next. Ah. My turn came around. Unlike seeing him from afar, seeing the man up close amplified the destructive power. While it's true that his body was big, he also had a certain atmosphere. It was as if he was a warrior. This person may have been an adventurer himself. If he started working as a clerk after retiring from that, you should expect some excellent conduct from him. Lyle, start coming to this person from here on. As the second was arbitrarily deciding things on his own, I requested an adventurer's registration from the man. I'd like a registration form. Two please. He understood and prepared some blank sheets. Registration, is it? Well, nice to meet you, I'm known as Hawkins. If there's anything you don't understand, don't hesitate to ask me. Also, if you're both registering, how about registering as a party? Party registration? As I tilted my head, Novum responded faster than the second. We'll be in your care. As opposed to his appearance, Hawkins-san had quite a polite tone. The paperwork began proceeding forwards. After registering here, your home guild branch will be set as this one, here in Dalian. When you want to change the center of your activity, please submit a transfer request to the guild. After that, submit an arrival form at your final destination and fill out the paperwork to make that guild your home. Otherwise, even if you can sell monster materials to the guild, you won't be able to take up requests, so please commit it to mind. I filled out the blank page, and Hawkins checked to see if I had missed anything. Both me and Novum were quite used to this sort of desk work. I'd been trained for it back home, and more than anything, there were many things that required my signature back there. Splendid. Then could you please apply some of your blood to these 2 sheets? Please make use of this needle. Don't worry, it's been properly disinfected. You as well, miss. Yes. Thank you. I used the needle to prick my fingertip. The blood welled up and formed a small ball, before I smeared it on the silver sheet. Wonderful. This here works as medicine, so feel free to use it after wiping off the blood. Well then, please write your name on them as well. One of them will be kept by the guild. The silver sheet was something like a guild-issued identification card. Otherwise known as a guild card. If its owner were ever to die, it was a mysterious item where the name on the card would disappear. It also carried some records of its holder's actions that the guild could read at their own discretion. Hearing that explanation, the second. So when so many years go by, you get something this convenient. My time never had a tool like that, you know? And wait, isn't it an item that would usually have a price tag on it? It was just as the second said. With your first registration, the cost comes to 5 silver coins. But if payment seems impossible, then a small commission from your future rewards, 10 to 20% of your compensation, will be put towards paying the fee. Will that be fine? Novum took out a gold coin. No, we'll pay. Understood. Then your guild card is being prepared, so please wait on the sofa over there. Hawkins-san took the sheets over to the door behind the counter. After a short while, he returned to his reception desk work. Novum and I headed for the sofa, and as we sat in it side by side, we began to draw some glances from the surroundings. Tongue-clicking and envious eyes were directed at me. The reason was clear. It was because of the looks of the girl sitting beside me. Just as I thought, he was a polite and kind one, Lyle-sama. That's right. Novum didn't seem bothered in the slightest. There, the first, who had been quiet up till now, spoke up. You blockheads. Don't be throwing such vile glances at Novum-chan, you bastards. The second chimed in. If you do anything to Novum-chan, Lyle's going to beat the living daylights out of you. Finally, even the fourth spoke up. Well, it's true that we can't do anything to them directly from here, but doesn't it just sound pitiful when you say it, you two? And wait, don't act up so much, please. Lyle's going to collapse. While letting out the aura of a worldly wise man, the fourth shut the other two up. The height of their emotions, and the act of making it so I could hear them, depleted my mana. To get so tired from doing absolutely nothing, it's as if I'd become diseased. I had never thought of my magic as small before. But from what I hear from the ancestors, I'm quite low on the scale. Well then, these are your guild cards. You've already been registered as a party, so you've had each other's names carved into your cards. The card Hawkins-san handed over had my name carved in large letters onto it. And in small letters, Novum's was there as well. Here is the pamphlet of the guild's terms and conditions. We're not offering any training today, but tomorrow morning, in the 3rd floor's meeting room, there's a short course geared towards novice adventurers, so if you have the time, please drop by. He highly recommended us to take it. Thank you for the thorough explanation. As Novum offered her thanks, Hawkins-san stared at us, slightly lost in thought. Is something wrong? I tried asking, but he returned a bitter smile. No, it's just that it's rare to find new adventurers who aren't scared of me, so I unintentionally. Also, this is just my personal opinion, but, you too, if you have the economic leisure, how about you hire an advisor? An advisor? On Novum's response, Hawkins-san began explaining. Yes. A guild-certified excellent adventurer, for a few months, the usual period being 3. For that time, you hire the advising adventurer as a client. There are numerous types of contracts, but you could pay with a percentage of your rewards, or pay a lump sum upfront. Based on the payment method, the quality of hired adventurer is subject to change, it seems. Paying with a cut of your own wages gave you a lower middle-class one at best. But by paying it upfront, an intermediate leave adventurer, or perhaps even an upper-level one, would take on the job. In exchange, the cost was a whopping 10 gold. No, we don't have that sort of money. Thinking that, I was about to ask Novum if she wanted to hire one on commission, however. Then we'll pay up front, please. Up front, is it? Novum produced 10 golden coins from her purse. As Hawkins-san accepted it, he had quite a nervous expression on his face. Having said that, he probably expected us to choose the percent-based option. Wait, Novum. As I tried to stop her, she began explaining with a serious expression. Lyle-sama, will be able to receive guidance from one the Adventurers Guild recognizes as a skilled adventurer. We should treasure this opportunity. Especially since it seems that we don't have a great enough understanding of what it is an adventurer is. I do think Novum's opinion is correct, but I'm more shocked that she paid out 10 gold coins at the drop of a hat. She's much too different from me, who was thrown out penniless, and who only had money borrowed from a servant. Hawkins-san asks for confirmation once more. Then you will be paying a lump sum of 10 gold coins. Is that correct? Yes, I'll leave it to you. Please get us an excellent advisor. Of course. If they turn out not to your liking, we're willing to refund the money you paid. He seemed to have some confidence, but still, the conversation seemed to be proceeding without my input for quite a while. And... Hey man, looking from the sidelines, you look quite useless right now, Lyle. The second generation's words were quite heavy on my heart. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Volume 1, Chapter 7, Money. Money. After completing our adventure registration, Novum and I found a relatively moderate priced inn to stay at. Having secured and settled into a room, we looked over the booklet Hawkins had given us. Its contents were quite simple. Don't cause trouble to people. There were also some things pertaining to the guild's rules and manners. It's as if it were geared towards children. I let out my frank opinion, and Novum concurred. That's right. But things like this are important too. From the Jewel, the second generation's voice showed extreme approval. Right. That's right. There are a lot of people out there who can't even follow simple ironclad rules. Those words seem to have his true feelings behind them, or should I say, it seems he has a lot of discontentment, that second generation. I looked through it from start to finish, before closing it and putting it away. Novum had also finished it. There, I decided to bring up something I had been curious about. Novum, about that money. Before I could finish, the second generation cut me off from within the Jewel. Lyle, stop. Don't ask about it. No, wait, I don't want to hear about it. But the first generation seemed curious, as he pressed further. Why's that? Just ask if you're curious. And wait, the Forks' house is currently a barren one, right? They must have deep pockets, right? Does that mean we've been able to repay them a bit? As the first generation was letting out a satisfied voice, the second shouted. And along with that, my mana depleted. You fool! Even if they're a barren house, Novum-chan's the second daughter. Preparing such a large sum is going to be quite reckless, even for a baron's kid. Recognize that. Really? I hadn't noticed that. The value of 10 gold was still not what I would consider to be that large of a sum. Novum's expression was a little troubled. But she smiled as she spoke. It's fine, Lyle-sama. It definitely was quite an expenditure, but we still have some reserves. As I thought, 10 gold really was a hefty sum. Since I didn't even have many gold ones on me, it even made me mildly jealous. I'm surprised you had so much on you. Was it from your parents? And no, well, it wasn't? Then what? There, the second started screaming loudly. However, I was the only one who could hear it. Don't go any further, is what I'm trying to tell you. Novum hung her head. Finally realizing that I had probably asked what I shouldn't have, I began to become a little panicked. And no, well, I was just a little curious, so I tried to bring an end to the conversation, but before that, Novum opened her mouth. My parents did indeed prepare some funds for my travels. But, well, it was my own flight of fancy, so I couldn't really accept it, and so, well. She looked like she had some trouble getting the words out, before she voiced something unthinkable. The clothes and household implements prepared for my marriage to Lyle-sama, I sold them. I deeply apologize. Looking at her disheartened face, I realized I had screwed up. On top of that, the ancestors in the Jewel started talking amongst themselves. Implements, The first was bewildered. That's why I warned you. Stop it, the feeling of guilt is. The third also spoke. This is about my era, but the dowry prepared for the house you marry into, for a woman, it was quite a fortune back then, how is it now? The seventh generation answered. It still is a fortune. It's a fortune you bring with you from your own home, and the family you marry into doesn't have the right to use it freely. And wait, the family that sent her out was probably doing the best they could, so, considering the Walt house's current status, we may have asked the unreasonable of the Forks' house. Hearing that, the first and fourth generations screamed out. No. That's why I told you not to ask. For a girl to have that sort of money on her person, there's got to be a reason. I'm sorry, sis, I'm sorry that even my descendants are bringing trouble to you. TL, he uses Ain-san, which, rather than siblings, hints to a boss-subordinate relationship. What are we going to do about this one? My descendants are still bothering the Forks' house. Just what do I have to do to repay this debt? The first just kept screaming. The second seemed to have a vague idea from the start. The third seemed to reminisce about the times he was taken care of by the Forks' house, and he began to apologize. From his voice, the fourth generation seemed to be spilling quite an amount of tears. This is using up my mana like crazy, you know, and wait, my ancestors gave them this much trouble as well? For them to support the Walt house this far, were they not an overly benevolent clan? In truth, Novum was also serving me. Also, this feeling of guilt is nothing to laugh at. To marry into a family, even if you weren't a noble, the woman's family was supposed to prepare a dowry. I should add on, if it's a decent family, that is. But from a girl's point of view, marriage was one of the most important scenes of life's events. The belongings and clothing bought for it were probably purchased without compromise. To her, it was probably something like her treasure. She sold it, and used it for my sake. But wait a minute, for her to be able to prepare the money in the few days following my expulsion from the house. Thinking along those lines, did she open a yard sale with those household implements she gathered up or something? Noticing that, my face turned pale, but Novum tried to console me. Don't worry. They were still officially the property of my parents, but I properly obtained permission. Also, in order for Lyle to succeed as a splendid adventurer, it was a necessary transaction. I'm happy I was able to use them like that. Once they'd been bought once, furniture counted as used. What's more, if she was selling them in a rush, the merchants would likely beat down the prices. Naturally, the merchant's side was probably troubled, having her come to them all of a sudden. Compared to the price they were bought at, there's no doubt she sold them for quite a lower sum. Perhaps because they were tired from all the screaming, the jewel was silent. No, there's also the possibility my mana was at its limit. In all truth, I did feel considerably tired. Why? Yes? Why would you go that far? They're the belongings you preciously assembled, right? Even if it wasn't me, you'd be sure to find a marriage partner soon enough. Even so, why did you go as far as to sell them to tag along with me? Lyle-sama. I ended up taking out some of my anger on her. Having lost my status as future head, I was a man who was abandoned by his family. I was oblivious to the world, and I bothered Novum enough that the ancestors were fed up with me. If you're looking for anything I've built up over the years, the current me has nothing. No status, and no money. I simply couldn't understand why Novum would stick herself to a man like that. When my parents began to give me a cold treatment at 10, I gradually witnessed the surrounding people distancing themselves from me. Even at that time, I got the feeling Novum was by my side. Betting on the slight chance that I would become the next heir, on me. But right now, I truly have nothing. For her to still follow me is something I couldn't believe somewhere in my heart. There's no value in trying to serve me. To my younger sister, to Seals, I lost, and my family drove me out. I'm that wimpy and idiotic of a man. I have no value at all. Novum looked at me with all earnesty. From her violet irises, I averted my eyes. I was scared of seeing her giving up on me. From back then, I exerted myself, as if driven by fear. I exerted myself to not be thrown away. But that effort was always all too easily surpassed. Every time that happened, I just tried even harder than before. Even when I knew it would never be requited. I always kept at it alone. There, Novum spoke to me. It's because I was always watching. When we were small, Lyle-sama really could accomplish anything, and he was so kind. Do you remember? Back then, I was alone, and even when I was called to the Kansama's mansion, I couldn't get close to the other kids. My youthful memories are all nice ones to me. But due to my anguish at 10, I had gradually started to forget them. Come to think of that, you're right. But while you were alone, you were quite wary of your surroundings, and to attract people's attention, you would often pull pranks on the men, right? By trying to gain attention through mischief, she only served to isolate herself more. As the successor to Account's house, I remember trying to mediate her disputes. It's a memory from my childhood. That time may have been the most enjoyable of my life. You always tried your hardest, and even after getting a cold reception from your family, you never gave up. Looking at that, I decided to try my best as well, but from 10 onwards, I was separated from my surroundings. And I ended up living mostly alone. I had memories of Novum being around, but with the rumors being spread about me, I never called out to her. It was when I was 13. I was called by my parents, and told that my marriage to Lyle-sama had been established. I was happy. Happy that I could support you from your side. But it's all useless. My effort was all useless in front of that girl. Due to the sudden loss of my mana, my vision became hazy. Me taking out my anger was because my sense of self-control was waning. I think. Tears are starting to come out. There's no one who'll look at me. I was always watching. Lyle-sama, you tried your best. But I was driven out. I lost everything. I indecisively issue out complaints, but Novum gently patted my shoulder. I'm here. I'm by your side. My parents don't need me. They never looked at me, all I wanted was their praise, and yet, my tears are sloppily falling down. The feelings I had been enduring in the depths of my heart were starting to rise up, making my mood just a little lighter. I was watching. You were splendid, Lyle-sama. No matter the time, you never gave up, and even when you were scared, you would stand your ground. You're a splendid person. Right. I was afraid of the existence of my sister. The perfect being known as Seals was truly scary. But I couldn't stand to run away. Even if I knew I would lose, I would challenge her. And so, I lost everything. Now, it's starting to not matter to me. I thought everything would work out one way or another, but society isn't that kind of an entity. For someone like me, I'm not sure where I would be if Novum wasn't there. You have value, Lyle-sama. I can say that with confidence. So let's try our hardest together. Yeah. That night, I fell asleep, while still clinging to Novum. There's no one who'll look at me. I lost everything. But Novum-chan's by your side. This is where you should stand up for yourself. Don't act so spoiled. The first, fourth, and third were singing, and lastly, the second shouted at me. On our second day in Dalian, we took the newbie course at the guild, bought whatever items were necessary, and slept in preparation for tomorrow. But I was told that an emergency meeting was to be called, so I was forcefully dragged to the meeting room. On the circular room surrounded by 8 doors, 4 people were dancing on the table as they teased me. So you guys were watching. It's embarrassing. Ridiculously embarrassing. It was so embarrassing that I couldn't look Novum in the eye the next morning. When night fell, the ancestors began teasing me about an embarrassing memory. We're the ones who should be feeling embarrassed here. The first had been singing in high spirits, but his face completely changed as he shouted at me. I was embarrassed too, you know. But my mana was drained, and I was wobbling unsteadily, and my mood was also down, so there was no helping it, given the situation. I rebuked with all my might, but the eyes around me were cold. The 7th generation. Well, he was driven out of the house at the ripe age of 15, so Lyle's still a child, right? So you were lonely, Lyle? Stop it. I don't need your sympathy. It'll make me unnecessarily embarrassed. As I hit my face with both hands, I found that my head was quite feverish. My face was definitely bright red right now. In a meeting room like that, perhaps the 5th generation was irritated, so he strained his voice. Let's get to the main topic already. You've teased him enough, haven't you? The 4th got off the table and returned to his seat. That's right. We've got some teasing material for later, so let's call it close today. The 1st generation said it with a satisfied tone, but having them see my embarrassing moments, I couldn't offer a complaint. This'll definitely be arbitrarily brought into conversations to come. These guys. And so, what's with the urgent meeting? I wanted to get this over with already, so I transitioned to the main point. There, the 4th generation started up his role as a facilitator and broke the ice. Lyle, how about you just get married to Novum-chan already? Yes, marriage, is it? I see. Marriage. I looked at generations 5 and onwards. Generally, 5 and on didn't favor Novum. So about their opinion on the matter. Marry her already. And wait, I think it'll be hard for you to find someone willing besides that child. You know the Walt house's precepts, right? The Walt family precepts were a set or required criterion to go by when choosing a woman for the Walt family. Having apparently been set by the 1st generation, it still held strong in the Walt family. I know them, and Novum definitely clears the requirements, but the Walt house precepts. Those are: a woman to be welcomed as a wife must, first of all, have a superior appearance. Second, be healthy. Third, have a sturdy body. Fourth, have a good head on her shoulders. Fifth, have nice skin. Those 5. Since we became a count family, a clause about magic was also added. Sixth, must excel in magic. It appears the 5th generation tacked that one on. The 2nd generation continues to heavily recommend her. You may have been exiled from the Walt house, but no matter how you look at it, the next head's got to be Lyle, right? It's still a continuing family, for argument's sake, and I also went through some trouble, but if you let Novum-chan get away, I doubt you'd find anyone else. And wait, if you're not going to get yourself married after all of that, I'll seriously curse you to death, man. The 6th generation takes control. Let's put cursing and whatnot aside for now, and so, there's no objections to this marriage, right? Lyle, go get hitched as soon as you can. And no, it's not that I don't like Novum. But even if you tell me that all of a sudden, I don't have the aptitude, or anything like that. There, the third spoke. Then you just have to try hard from here on. If you've undergone a proper education, then you should be able to handle most things to some extent. Well, I never had trouble finding a bride, so I don't really know, but it's apparently quite dreadful, you know? Hearing that, the second flew into a rage. That's because I'm the one who found her for you. So that you wouldn't have trouble finding someone like me. Just how hard do you think I worked? While meeting room was getting heated up, the first generation said something quite troublesome. Hey, what's a precept? As if he really didn't comprehend it, he tilted his head as he gazed at everyone's faces. Oi. You what dot? The hell dot? I kinda had a feeling he would say something like that dot. Why doesn't the first generation know? Wait a second. Wasn't it the criteria set forth by the first generation? Everyone was shocked. No, only the second generation was shaking with anger, and it looked as if he was going to explode. The first was completely oblivious to all of this. Novum-chan's a good kid, so I do think it's best if you get hitched. But what's all this about precepts? Was there some restriction on choosing marriage partners? What idiot set forth some pain-in-the-ass rule like that? The second stood up and pointed his finger in rage. It was you, dumbass. No way dot. It appears that the first generation had no recollection of the so-called regulations. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Volume 1, Chapter 8, Veteran Adventurers Elfie. TL, the dramatic irony in all this is that those ancestors are exactly what Lyle's been wishing for much of his life. Also, I'm changing orb to gem, which is an alternate translation of the same word, as it fits better with jewel. Veteran Adventurers Elfie. I learned on the morning of the third day that the Walt family precepts were actually something that had sprung from a misunderstanding. On the guild's third floor, Novum and I met the female adventurer who would become our advisor for the first time. The name of the adventurer Hawkins-san brought to us was Zelfie-san. Her quirky, short-cut purple hair was quite a distinguishing characteristic, and she appeared in the room with quite a rough appearance. On the bare skin unhidden by her clothes, I could see some remnants of past injuries. The look in her eyes was sharp, and she really had the atmosphere of a capable adventurer. Zelfie-san, these are the two fresh adventurers I'm referring you to. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure. As we gave our greetings, Zelfie-san looked over us and nodded a few times. I thought it was some sort of joke when I heard some newbies had hired me, but it looks like you guys some nobles from someplace. Hearing that, I was a little shocked. Today was the third generation's duty, but he seemed mildly surprised as well. She's the type where you can't underestimate her because she's a woman. And wait, has there been a rise in female adventurers as of late? This must be the flow of time. Even so, it's a strange feeling. Strange? On the third generation's words, I felt like tilting my head, but I stopped myself. Hawkins-san offers a warning. Zelfie-san, inquiring too deeply into a client's origin is. I got it already. I won't be bringing trouble to Boss Hawkins. It's just that I'll need to put out some rules if I'm gonna teach them. Even more so if they're noble brats. I can't have them half-assing a job, you see. If you don't like that, I'm stepping down from this advisor position. I won't be taking responsibility for you guys. She looked at me and Novum. We nodded and asked about those rules. Understood. As long as it isn't something impossible. That's so? Then first, don't complain about my advising method. I mean, listen to what I gots to say. Second, I'll be beating the basics into you guys in 3 months. Don't be picky with work. Third is. It was quite normal up to here. We waited for her to say what the third rule was. Third is you gotta increase your numbers by 1 at least. It can be temporary, so become able to work in teams of at least 3. On hearing Zelfie-san's rule, Novum and I locked eyes. There, Hawkins asserted a similar opinion. Quite right. If you've got 3 members, then it will be easier for us to find requests for you. I hadn't been thinking about comrades. It was because I thought that as long as I was able to learn the basics, I would be able to carry out recruiting after that. Fumu, she looks to be thinking for your sake in her own way. We're also amateurs when it comes to being adventurers, so it would be best if you listen to her here. It wasn't because of the third generation's opinion or anything, but I decided to uphold the 3 terms. I understand your conditions. We have no objections. As I said that, Zelfie-san smiled. Rather than her overbearing expression, she was much more appealing as a woman when she smiled. Good. If that's so, I'll take the job. And wait, I was a tad startled when I heard I was teaching newbies, but you're surprisingly obedient. Novum asked Zelfi-san a question. Is that really something so rare? It's usually different. Nobody generally has any money, so they honestly save it up before going to the mid-level advisors like us. They each pool about 2 to 3 gold and give a request to the guild. As long as they plan on rising in rank, most do request it, though. Zelfi-san's view was supplemented by Hawkins-san. Here, we have a comparative abundance of work, and it's an easy place for freshly recruited adventurers to find jobs. That's why the Dalian Adventurer Guild has adopted such an advisor system. After getting to a point, it's easy to start getting worried about one's growth, so there are quite a few who want to push themselves, see? They first learn the foundation from some low-class adventurer, and come to a mid-class one like us when they think they're ready. This system was only in place in a handful of branches, Dalian included, apparently. You could also say it was a branch known for putting its power into training new recruits. Well, this is a little different from normal, but Zelfi-san is a seasoned veteran, who's been an adventurer for 12 years. Her experience is abundant, and there isn't an issue with her conduct. Please use her as reference, by all means, besides her manner of speech. As Hawkins-san said that, Zelfi-san raised an objection. I'm still in my 20s. Stop calling me a veteran, boss. It makes me sound old. Well, please decide your plans for here on out in this room. Learn the necessary knowledge and experience of an adventurer from our veteran. I'll be waiting for you all to become splendid adventurers. Hawkins-san leaves the room, seeing us off with a smile. Novum and I were left under the guidance of Zelfi-san. In the guild's meeting room, Zelfi-san gave us an idea of the necessities of an adventurer. Well then, I've gone through all the basics, but the most important thing is comrades. You've got to understand that. No matter how skilled a guy is, they'll still make mistakes, so watch yourself. The general things were how to accept work at the guild and how to watch ourselves when we brought monsters and such into the guild building. If you accepted a quest and failed to complete it, it was recorded on your guild card. On it, your individual, as well as your party's request success rate, and record of problematic behavior was written. Even when everything seemed normal, be wary. Don't do what you're incapable of. An adventurer shouldn't act adventurous. We were taught things like that. And in the end, she wrapped things up with the importance of comrades. Simple numbers can become power. When ruffians gather together, that in itself makes them stronger as a whole. Make sure you get that, okay? There, Novum raised a question. Quantity aside, shouldn't we be concerned about the quality? Zelfi-san shook her head. That depends where that quality's been assigned. Do you want to make a strong guy with a lot of problematic behavior your comrade? I was unable to endorse such conduct, so I denied it. I don't want to. But from the jewel, the 3rd generation. Tools and humans all have a way to use them. Isn't this person's a little dark? Right? Even if there be a problem with strength, based on the contents of the request, it's often best to get some honest people. Of course, that depends on where you intend to aim, she added. You could defeat monsters outside and sell them. You could accept requests and complete them. You could dive into a labyrinth and search for treasure. They're all an adventurer's job, but there are barely any individuals or parties who can do all of them, you know? Think closely of how you all plan on raking it in, and find comrades to fit that. Where should we aim, and what are we lacking? Learning that is important. Even if we have the necessary abilities, learning a specific craft could take too much time, so hiring a person with the necessary skill set and making them your comrade is a valid option. There's a limit to what a single person can do alone. It's fine to aim for first class, but if you misunderstand that fact, you'll make a grave mistake one day. At the knowledge she pressed at us, Novum and I nodded. Good. Then let's talk business. Of course, it's quickest to learn these sort of things through experience. Saying that, she presented a document she had prepared for us. Zelfi-san? Novum seemed troubled. What's up? To a smiling Zelfi-san, Novum spoke. This page has cleaning the city drainage written on it, but... Yep, that's right. A person who refuses to accept requests like these will never accept one in their lives, so you should be getting some experience here while you have the chance. She was smiling, but I get the feeling her grin grew wider as she said that. Could it be you intend to break the rules I said already? Trust is important to adventurers too, you know. Our first job as an adventurer was to clean the drainage system. The meeting room and the jewel. When I had fallen asleep, I found the sixth and seventh generations in opposition to my first job. As I was saying, I won't let Lyle do something like sewer cleaning. Look here, even if you stick on former, he's the heir to the Walt house, isn't he? Fifth generation, why not say something here? The sixth had a wild look to him, and the generations to follow evaluated him as a scoundrel, so he didn't really hold a good image in my mind. My grandfather, the seventh generation, agreed with him. You all are fine with having Lyle do something like that. But the first and fourth didn't seem to have any interest. More than that. Why not? As long as Novumchan's not dirted, there's no problem. The point the first generation was interested in was whether Novum would get injured or sullied during the cleaning. I'm also a man. I'll make sure I'm the one getting heavily dirted and have Novum help me indirectly. Zelfi-san also said she gave a high evaluation to a man who looked out for a woman. Of course, it was also the ancestors' opinion. Well, since we have the chance, it's best to let Lyle learn a bit about the world. In all honesty, I think that adventurer called Zelfi is onto something there. The second gave an appraisal of Zelfi-san. But the sixth generation was different. Even if you stick on a former, you can call Lyle a noble, can't you? Unlike you guys, Lyle's a real among reals. A bona fide noble. To the sixth generation, who was quite worked up, the third spoke. Why are you treating us as fakes? Just what's your difference between real and fake? The fourth was the same. Only the fifth didn't seem all too interested in it. And wait, that fifth seems to take a neutral stance no matter what happens. The seventh started to divulge my lineage. Lyle carries the blood of my wife, the blood of a count's house. Listen here, to put it simply, he's a child who carries the blood of a royal family that predates the Centris kingdom before ours. Well, you just dropped quite a bomb there. The fact the third generation referred to as explosive. That's the first I'm hearing of this. Was something even I didn't know. The area started getting a little noisy. The third generation looked at me, as he sought confirmation from the sixth. It seems the boy in question had no idea about it. You sure? Hearing that, I also nodded. I never heard anything like that from father. Of course, I was ignored at age 10 and onwards. It may just be that my dad never brought up something as important as that. There are truths not to be revealed on the surface. In our time, the former royal family sought reinstatement and took advantage of the corrupt politics of the era to stir up a rebellion. The third generation participated in a war with another country and died in battle. But henceforth, the Walt houses had often headed out into battle, even if it be for a small-scale skirmish. Among them, the sixth and seventh were part of a generation that participated in skirmishes, internal discord, and even wars with foreign lands. The situation has died down as of late, but I heard stories of my father going out to war as well in his younger days.